There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, hey,
Oh, look.
it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
And apparently,
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and who knows? After that Supreme Court ruling that came out, well, pretty much 24 hours ago yesterday, we talked about it a heck of a lot on the show yesterday. Maybe we are also the home of common sense as a country. We can only hope. But I'm intrigued by whether that landmark ruling by the Supreme Court that you can have a piece of paper saying you're legally, according to that piece of paper, the opposite sex from the one you actually biologically, in reality, were born and will die as. But it doesn't actually make you that sex. If you're born a woman, you stay a woman. If you're born a man, you stay a man. Therefore, a trans woman, which is a trans-identified man, is still a man and will always be a man for all purposes. Not just when we're having a conversation on air and what pronouns we might or might not want to use, but also for the case of, well, pretty much every time when men identifying as women are trying to gain access to women's spaces, whether that's our toilets, whether that is our changing rooms, women's prisons, women's refuges, women's sport, you name it. But what I'll ask you today is, do you think this will bring an end to trans ideology that has permeated our schools, our hospitals, every public service? It's not just across the civil service and elsewhere, it's everywhere. It's in an awful lot of our private organisations as well. Do you think things will change? It's in sport, obviously. Do you think things will change now? Is this the game changer? Because, let's face it, I mean, the law has not changed. This has simply clarified the law as being, well, sane and based on reality and biology, like we kind of thought it was in the first place, before the trans ideology madness took over the country. Tell us if you think it will change. Tell us why you think it will. Tell us why you think it won't. Later in the show, we are going to be talking to one of the three women from For Women Scotland who brought this case. Another absolute hero, I think, for all of us who just want sanity in our world. We're also going to be talking to Shivani Dave. She is the journalist, the broadcaster, who only some months ago we had a conversation in which I was told off for using what she she identifies as a they, them, as non-binary, she claims were the wrong pronouns. Well, they weren't, because she is a woman. She was born a girl, she is a woman now, and she will always be a woman. She's agreed to come back on the show later today, and we'll be discussing what she makes of the Supreme Court ruling. I don't think you really want to miss that. Anyway, apart from all of that, we are going to be talking about British officials who were in talks with the French about a deal that would see one Channel migrant being deported in return for receiving one person from France. It's a pilot scheme, one in, one out. The UK would look to accept migrants seeking to reunite with their families. I'm not quite sure how we benefit from that, do we? If they were allowed to be here anyway, they would be here already, right? Also going to be talking about Keir Starmer set to join an EU net zero scheme as soon as next month. It's a move, though, that risks driving up energy bills for millions of households. The PM is planning to use the summit in May to align the UK and EU emissions trading schemes as part of his reset with Brussels, basically taking us back in to the EU by the back door, which has just been desperately trying to do ever since we left. Going to talk about all that, Ukraine peace talks, you name it, it's going to be on the show. And I'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls, of course, are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard networking message. They're free on X and, of course, free on YouTube as well. And I do want to particularly hear from you after that landmark ruling by the Supreme Court. Do you think this will actually change things? Do you think this is the game changer? Because it hasn't changed the law. It's just like made the law clear. It was a law that we all thought was clear anyway. Does this leave any room for trans activists, trans ideologists to sort of keep pushing that agenda and stealing women's rights? I'd love to hear from you. Tell us why you think it will change, why you think it won't. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. And any other topics we're talking about. And I'm delighted to say, joining us today is the always very dapper and chirpy Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I was thinking, like, there are some days I think, oh, we're going to talk about Ukraine. I'm so glad in particular. I'm always glad that you're in. I'm sure our audience was glad that you're here. But I was particularly glad that you're here because one of the things about working in the military is, you have to deal with facts. Mm-hmm. Facts are very, very important, aren't they? You can't, it's not what someone feels. I feel there are this many soldiers with this many guns. You actually have to deal with the real world. And we've not been dealing in the real world a lot lately, I think, when we've talked about a lot of the ideologies that have permeated our society. What was your reaction to that landmark ruling from the Supreme Court yesterday?
Oh, I thought it was superb, common sense prevailing. And in the military, yes, you have to deal with facts, but you also have to deal with government policy. And
often these things...
Well, exactly. And what the Supreme Court ruling clarified was what the 2010 definition was in the Equality Act. And therefore, everything that's happened since 2010, where you've had the extremists coming in, trying to bring in woke policies and all the rest of it, most of that just has to be ripped up and start again. And the start again is really quite simple. It's men and women. And
this is the interesting thing, because this doesn't actually change the law. And we were talking about it all down the show yesterday, and yet the absurdity of needing 5 judges, spending months and months after 5 years of this court case, an 88-page report to tell us, well, as I pointed out yesterday, every 5-year-old knows. We know what a man is, we know what a woman is, we've always known. But it is amazing how many of our politicians, particularly in the Labour Party, Lib Dems and Greens just as bad, but particularly on the left, have been, well, just spouting abject nonsense. And it was really interesting talking to Rosie Duffield, the former Labour MP. She was elected as Labour MP back last year, but she was totally ostracised from the Labour Party. She's now seen as an independent over the trans issue, which she simply said, the most outrageous, disgusting, transphobic, hateful thing one could possibly say, that only women have cervixes. Yeah. Well, like literally a statement of biological fact. Yeah. And she was told that she shouldn't have said that.
Well, I know it's ridiculous. And actually, the best quote I saw today was from Ian Adkins, who's a good friend of the show, who put out on social media that Ed Miliband should connect all of the Cabinet's bicycles to the national grid to harness the backpedalling that's going on.
Exactly.
Because that's the best way of getting towards net zero.
Well, exactly. And a lot of people pointing out that, Keir Starmer and others need to apologise. For 99.9% of women is completely biological, he said, and of course they haven't got a penis. That's what he told the Sunday Times just 2 years ago. A year before that, in 2022, he said trans women are women. That is not just my view, he said, that is actually the law. Again, that wasn't the law. That wasn't the law. It has been the law through the combined effects of the 2004 Gender Recognition Act and the 2010 Equality Act. And the point was, those two laws basically clashed. But where those two laws clash, it's very clear. The Equality Act and the use of the word women for women's safe, single-sex spaces means biological women. It has been hilarious. I'm not going to lie, hilarious to see the backlash from some of the activists. But in particular, the platforming on Sky and BBC and elsewhere of many of these trans activists. This is a ruling about safeguarding women's rights. Yeah. Okay, you know when we had some of those court rulings about the post office, the sub postmasters and things. I don't recall the BBC after those rulings showing that these people had been wronged and that they needed to be owed money and an apology and have criminal convictions taken off their records and the like. I don't remember the BBC going, oh, well, we need to hear the views of the poor people running the top of the post office and how this has impacted them. I don't remember them doing that. But when there was a ruling from the Supreme Court saying that women have been wronged, girls have been wronged, and that our safe spaces are required spaces of single sex, and our sport has been stolen from us by a completely wrong interpretation of the law, they immediately go to the people who have wronged us, who have demanded our spaces. I find that absolutely extraordinary and, frankly, the BBC, somewhat insulting to the 51% of the population who are women.
Well, it's not just insulting women, and I think that's where the biggest victory lies. But it's also insulting other minority groups. So it's brought a safe space for lesbians.
Yep.
The trans extremists are not fighting for a cause for those individuals who want, for whatever reason, to identify and
do what you want. Live your life.
Live as if they were a different sex. They want to force it on people, and actually, those that want to do that quietly, without raising and all the rest of it, the extremists, the trans extremists, are actually hurting them.
Oh, completely. The people who've been most hurt by this are people who were just, I don't really understand what people mean by that. I'm going to live as a woman, other than you're going to, I don't know, grow your hair long and wear a dress. I mean, I don't think people even notice people dressing what might be regarded as strangely anymore. I really don't. I live in central London. Oh, my God. I mean, people dress however they want. It's like,
nobody cares.
No, really, nobody cares.
And,
live your life, but I do care. I do care if you're going into the toilets and there's an 8-year-old girl in there who's going to be scared because she'll recognise you as obviously being a man. No, it's just that simple. It's not complicated. It was never complicated. This was never a trans hate, anything like that. It was simply about just upholding the rights that women had won over many, many years.
And if our politicians were grown up, they'd turn around and say,
Sauce.
I got it wrong, sorry. And it's not as if we haven't got senior legal brains at the top of government who should turn around and say, I'm sorry, I got my interpretation wrong.
But again, no, but they actually claim to believe this stuff. I mean, Angela Rayner has declined to apologise for endorsing a charter describing feminist groups raising fears about the treatment of trans children as hate groups. She's talked about campaigns for single-sex rape refuges for women as, I kid you not, trans exclusionist hate groups.
Yeah. See,
wow. Just wow. In an interview back in 2022, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, refused 3 times to define what a woman is, saying she was not going to get into rabbit holes on this. Yeah. Just utterly bizarre. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, at a Labour Party fringe conference, Labour Party conference fringe event in 21, said there are some dinosaurs on the right, and those dinosaurs exist in our own party who want to hoard rights. He's talking about discussing trans rights. He says, I will always be on the side of minority communities kept out of the mix for having the freedoms everyone else has enjoyed. This is the thing. No one was taking away trans people's rights. They talk about the trans rights and demand, like Stonewall saying this is deeply worrying. They have exactly the same rights as everybody else.
Exactly.
And those rights mean you could use the facilities that biologically match your body.
And the people whose rights have suffered. Look at Professor Robert Winston. There's nobody who's more qualified in genetics and how the human being works than him. Yeah. And he's been cancelled by many of the mainstream media
after going on Question Time.
Because he went Question Time to say men and women, and you can't have.
And he was very clear. He basically. And I remember Fiona Bruce, the host, was saying, brace yourselves. Brace yourselves for a geneticist stating genetic facts.
Yeah, and
that was controversial on the BBC.
Exactly.
These people are a joke.
And there are genetic mutations. The XX in chromosomes is you're a woman, XY is you're a man. The two variations that are more common are XXY and XXXY. But that mutation could only happen in the male.
So there we are then. It's just not complicated, is it? You know, one of the most interesting things about this, a senior barrister was pointing out yesterday, which is that this doesn't change the law, it simply clarifies the law, and that means that with all these employment tribunals and all of these cases where people have been excluded, they've lost their jobs, they can now go back. There's going to be a heck of a lot of money being paid out. Sue the backsides off everybody who did this. People have to pay. The trouble is, it's going to be the taxpayer that ends up paying for a lot of this, but so be it. People have been wronged for standing up on this. I'm so excited we're going to be talking to one of the women who brought this case. There are so many people talk about J.K. Rowling and really amazing women, those Sharon Davies and people like that. Just I admire them so much. But there are also so many women whose names we barely know who have actually fought this fight on the ground at great personal expense to their incomes, their reputations, to the abuse they've had. And I'm just in awe. I'm in awe of these women, and everyone should be. And they are women, not cis women. They are women. We'll talk about all that throughout the show. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Do you think things will change, though? Also want to talk about this plot for a one-in, one-out asylum scheme. We've got a record 705 illegal migrants cross the channel in 24 hours. The latest official figure is 8,888. And a pleasant, lovely number to look at. People who crossed, of course, it's more than 40% up on the same months, same winter, spring months as last year. But the idea of this is that we will get to hand back channel migrants to the French. They don't really want them back, but they get to basically hand over to us in return a family member of someone who has already come to this country. Obviously, it'll be a family member who doesn't have a right to be here and who's just seeking to join family members. Now, I'm not quite sure how that will actually make things better on the basis, Philip, that one of the main reasons people often send their young men, the strongest, fittest member of their family, or they send them over so they can establish a life here, and then you can use European, equality rights to claim, human rights to claim your right to bring your family together.
Yeah, it's daft. It's completely.
There you go. That's all you need to say. It's daft.
They're going to have to establish some mechanism of identifying these individuals and therefore starting them in the asylum-seeking process in France. Well, why don't you just do that anyway? And then tell anyone that comes in without going through that process, then they can't come in. Everyone that's military-age male should be automatically deported. Anyone that comes in without a passport or an identity document that's there should be put on a plane as they come straight to an airport. Oh, Rwanda would be quite good. And the only thing
why has no one thought of that?
The only thing about Rwanda was it's just a matter of volume of aircraft. The Labour Party did not let it start. If it had started, you could have put more aircraft in and put more. Well,
that's it. I was debating actually with a shadow cabinet minister now, but we had been in government. They were saying that Rwanda wouldn't have worked because it wasn't on the scale that it worked in Australia, because that was on. It was everybody. Nobody gets in the country, and that worked within months, not even years, within months. But he was saying no, the intention was absolutely to up the numbers. I don't think we would ever have upped the numbers to the numbers it needed to be. It needed to be pretty much everybody who got across the channel. Can I just ask you, before we go to break, and I'd love, by the way, to hear your thoughts on that. I know that Ian Collins and others were talking about that when it emerged yesterday. But also the Ukraine talks. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, has arrived, I think, is it in Italy to have talks? In France to have talks on Ukraine. Now, of course, it's interesting. Steve Witkoff, who's the sort of the envoy,
Donald Trump's golfing partner,
and golfing partner. Yeah. He's spoken to Putin a number of times. Obviously, he's talked to Trump a lot of times. Hasn't actually gone to Ukraine. It's extraordinary. Do you have any hope that there will be any move towards some sort of ceasefire or long-standing peace?
Well, talking to EU members, NATO members in Paris is not talking to Ukraine and Russia together. Russia doesn't want a ceasefire. Russia doesn't want peace, so it's not going to happen. This is America trying to further ensure that Europe steps up if something happens, and that's right and proper. Because America's concentrating quite clearly on what's happening in Southeast Asia in relationships with China, and we're all focusing on what's going on in the Middle East. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, there are just so many things going. Who would ever want to be a Secretary of State for the US in particular?
Well, he's not allowed to do anything, because you've got Witkoff doing it, and then you've got JD Vance as the attack dog in the Oval Office, and Marcus Rubio, who should be doing all of this, is sitting there on the sofa going, I don't know what I'm doing.
A small point worth making. We'll talk about all of this coming up in the show. I'd love to hear from you on all the topics we're talking about, particularly, though, on that Supreme Court ruling. Do you think it really changes anything? Because all they've done is clarify the law as it is already, which is what we all thought it was anyway, and what everybody accepted it was until about 10 years ago when the trans ideology hit. Do you think anything changes now? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
I think this is just water off a duck's back to Nigel Farage. He will lap that up because in a way it gives them something to divine themselves against.
100%.
They'll say, well, if these people, these left-wing teaching unions, hate us, we can't be all bad. I mean, he got asked about this yesterday, actually, up in Durham at a press conference, and he was like, I've got nothing against the trade union movement. In fact, they're trying to woo the trade union movement as a way of winning over Labour voters.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:23 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is still with us as well. Let's get straight to your messages and your calls coming in thick and fast on that Supreme Court ruling. Look, it's on the front page of pretty much every newspaper. That, and by the way, that we found aliens. We'll talk about that later in the show as well. But I'm asking you whether or not you believe this ruling that trans women are not women, something which we all kind of knew already. Do you believe this will actually bring an end to the trans ideology that is absolutely throughout our schools, our hospitals, every public service? I would say most of the private sector as well, our sports, you name it, everything. Tell us why you think it will, tell us why you think it won't. Gina says, finally some common sense in the world. The fact that this had to go all the way to the Supreme Court for us to be told something any sane person already knew just shows how bananas this world has been of late. Molly says, no, the ideology is too deeply ingrained within higher education and elsewhere to be curtailed by a legal decision. Luke says, of course not. Court cases will no doubt be coming. Just you wait and see. Oh, there's going to be a lot more court cases. Linda says, the National Education Union, the teachers' union, definitely won't. Will probably still continue to indoctrinate children in falsehoods. Theo says, far left lunacy. Removing from every walk of life. It's buried itself into the police, NHS, education, sports, government. And Belinda says, let's hope the civil servants listen. I worry about them. Oh, I do too. Let's go to the phone lines now. Gary is in Hampshire. Very good morning to you, Gary.
Oh, hi, Julia.
Morning.
Great show as always.
Oh, you're very kind, sir. What do you want to say?
Well, I wanted to say that I've had to stop listening to the news a lot recently because it's so depressing, but the Supreme Court ruling was the best bit of news I've heard for a while, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I have 3 daughters, some who are, gay, and this ruling is amazing. However, in terms of change, I think it's going to take some court cases and some companies paying out a lot of money before people are going to actually stand up.
It's it's always the bottom line. It's always when people either lose their jobs or have to make big payments, they finally realise. But we've had employment tribunals, Maya Forstadt and others, the protected belief, not belief, it's knowledge, that trans women are not women. That was established in law. That changed the law, the guidance. I mean, I've remonstrated with my own daughter's school, which are as sane as they can be. But some of the things you're doing in terms of trans stuff, is beyond what you're required to do, and I'm not happy with it. And I think loads of organisations are just completely making up their own interpretations because they'd rather listen to organisations like Stonewall or Mermaids, who are full trans ideology organisations, than listen to the law.
Yeah, I agree. And also, it's going to take, lots of things, like I said, but like, for instance, the nurse in Scotland who lost the job over this, and really hope that she pulls it out of the bag now and gets this sorted, and many others. But listen, I think no one who's a genuine nice person has got an issue with trans people.
No, of course.
It's what they're forcing down your throat, and it's the trans activists, which are a particularly nasty bunch of people, especially when they all turn on somebody.
Oh yeah.
They're just some of the worst activists out there, and I'm not sure they're going to change. But like I said, I just hope this hits some companies deeply in the pocket.
Yep. I mean, it's going to hit the public sector deeply in the pocket as well. A lot of this is going on in the public sector, and that's going to end up being our money is being wasted. I want the people who made the decisions to oust people from their jobs, censor people, and the like. I want those people sacked. I'm vindictive. I think people should be punished for vindictively censoring people, breaking the law, and then costing the public purse money. I want those people out of a job. Is that wrong of me?
Absolutely not. And when one of your messages said about the world's gone bananas, I don't think it's the world. I think it's the UK. We're a laughing stock. I honestly think other countries must look at what's going on here and think, what? It's
us in America. Well, Australia, we know it's going on in Australia. It's basically the Anglosphere where this has been going on. That's largely where it is. An awful lot of more pushback going on in other countries. Bizarrely, not such an issue in the Middle East, most of Africa, or in most of Asia. I wonder why. But anyway, they also don't have rainbow lanyards constantly thrust at them by every single private company. Well, we'll talk about this throughout the show. Gary, thank you so much for your call. I was saying on the show yesterday, I always thought the sport was one of the key things where we needed to get the message across. I've been ranting on about this for over 10 years, and I always knew it's once you got the dads. Once you got the dads, Gary's got 3 daughters. He says I think one or some of them are gay. He says this guy's not. He's not transphobic. He's not homophobic. He's nothing. He's a dad. He wants to protect his daughters. When you get dads involved, dads don't care about whether you send them abuse. Yeah. Dads don't care about threats. Dads don't care because dads are about looking after their kids.
But this is where your diversity has gone mad because the rainbow lanyard used to be LGB.
Yeah.
And then it came LGBT.
T's got nothing to do with LGB.
Nothing to do with, and therefore
Q is just an insult.
Exactly.
I's not a thing. A's not a thing. The plus isn't a thing.
It's hijacked something that was very sensible whenever it was launched because it was good to say we should everyone is treated as equal, and then
there's something that was apparently a source of shame for many years because it's criminalised. Should be something you should be proud of. You shouldn't not be able to be proud of your sexuality.
In the military, I had soldiers who were locked up and thrown out for being gay, which was wrong. They were brilliant soldiers.
Yep.
And it should never have happened.
Absolutely.
And bringing that out was quite was quite right.
Well, let's go to another call. Norman is in Leicestershire. Hello, Norman. What do you make of the decision? Do you think it will change anything? Can you hear me?
Supreme Court.
Sorry, Norman, you've got a bit of a bad line. Can we start again?
If you want, yes.
There you go. I can hear you now. What do you want to say?
Well, it's this Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, nothing will change because the lunatics are still in charge of the asylum. The universities and colleges and whatever have been brainwashing their students for the last 50 or 60 years, and they're the people that are now in charge. Whatever organisation, unions, the lot.
Yeah. I think you're right. That's my worry.
yeah, the lunatics are still in charge. And until we get rid of them, nothing will change.
Very good point. Thank you, Julia. I'm going to put that to our next guest, Norman. Thank you so much for your call. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to one of those women that you saw outside the Supreme Court celebrating. One of the 3 women from For Women Scotland, the brilliant women's rights organisation in Scotland. That was campaigning for this and brought this court case that has established the fact the rest of us already knew, that trans women are not women and men cannot become women. We're going to be talking to Susan Smith, Director of For Women Scotland, up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:32 is the time. Let's talk now to my next guest. She is one of the women that you would have seen outside the Supreme Court yesterday, celebrating just 24 hours ago after the Supreme Court judges took, well, quite a few months, 5 years for the case to actually get all the way to the Supreme Court, 88 pages to announce that, well, turns out trans women are not women. Only women are women and men are men. And they can't change from one to the other. You knew that before, I knew that before, but now it's been clarified as the law. But what changes now? Please welcome to the show Susan Smith, Director for Women Scotland. A very good morning to you, Susan.
Good morning.
I dread to think what a hangover you've got today.
Actually, I think I'm just high on adrenaline. My voice is starting to go, but apart from that...
A wonderful day of celebration. I have to say, the funny thing is about that Supreme Court ruling, after all the efforts that you and so many others have put into this, and people often forget there are a lot of unsung heroes in this who don't get all the cred and actually have a lot of cost to their lives, and you're one of them. And I'm on behalf of my audience and my family, I thank you so much for that. But the law didn't change yesterday, did it? It just clarified the law. So what actually changes now?
Well, there's been so much misinformation, and this has been the problem, because people are framing it as you said, some people are running around saying, oh, this is terrible, the law's changed. We never set out to change the law. We were very sure this was the law, and we just wanted the law to be enforced in places and services and spaces where it really, really matters to have single-sex facility. That was all. And we were sure that it couldn't be the case that you had a piece of legislation, the Equality Act, in which sex is a protected characteristic, and it was meaningless. That made no logical sense. Having said that, we were still incredibly nervous walking in there yesterday. We were terrified because it could have gone horribly wrong. Yeah.
I thought, actually, there was no way we would lose in that sense. Whatever the ruling, the absurdity of a ruling saying that, yes, a man who has paid his £5 and got his gender recognition certificate that says legally he is now a woman on his passport and is changing his birth certificate to be a lie, and saying, no, I am literally a woman. The absurdity of that would have been greeted with peals of laughter and disgust by the general British population. They wouldn't put up with it. They don't sign up to this madness. So I think, to a certain extent, if that had been exposed as the legal madness, that would also have been a victory. But this is a quicker way of getting to it. What I'm asking are...
It's a quicker way, and it's, you know, we were thinking that there was a possibility the judges might follow the EHRC argument and say, look, this is the law, it's an absolute mess, and you're going to have to do something about it. And I would imagine there are an awful lot of politicians, both in Westminster and in Scotland, breathing a huge sigh of relief today, because they don't have to do all that work, and it would have been a lot of work.
Indeed, and that was about clarifying it. But again, when everyone's getting confused about sex and gender, do they mean different things? What is a woman? What was meant by these single-sex spaces? And they pointed out in wonderfully clear black and white language, well, of course everyone knew what woman meant. Of course everyone knew that gender meant sex. These words were used interchangeably until very few years ago. In terms of what actually happens now, though, because the law hasn't changed, and effectively this sort of backdates the reality of this law and its interpretation. Many people who have lost work, who've been forced out, who've been, you know, faced horrific, you know, I mean, just outrageous treatment for, well, stating the fact and the law, could now be taking legal action, and I hope every single one of them does. I think there's going to be a lot of payouts. But what do you think is actually going to change in terms of what happens in women's toilets, in girls' toilets at schools, what happens in hospitals, what happens in women's sport, in refuges and prisons? Do you think, you know, this changes today, or are we just starting the next round of battles?
I don't think it'll change overnight, but I hope that it's the beginning of the end of some of this nonsense, because what will happen is that policies will have to be ripped up and rewritten, and guidance, faulty guidance that the Scottish Government has issued to schools, for example, will have to be trashed. There'll be some expensive work in Scottish schools because they were sticking in mixed-sex toilets willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And that wasn't...
Quite literally willy-nilly. You got a willy or a nilly?
That's all going to have to change, and it won't happen overnight, but
it will. But it has been clarified they are acting in breach of the law by having those facilities right now.
Were. You know, actually, they already were, and we've been on at them for ages because we did win another judicial review before this.
Yep.
And we've established that self-ID was not lawful.
Yeah.
But they've not changed the policies. They've persisted, even as we've written to them and pointed them out. Obviously, that's part of the tribunal in the Sandy Peggy case.
Yeah, she's, of course, the nurse who's being forced to get changed in a women-only changing room at the hospital, where a man who claims he's living as a woman, trans woman, a man was using those facilities.
Yes, and he did not have a GRC, so it was already unlawful.
Yeah.
There was no question he shouldn't have been in there. But you see, they were operating on these unlawful policies. They will have to change, because otherwise there will be a lot more tribunals and a lot more lawsuits, and women will win them now because we have the Supreme Court.
But they've been winning them an awful lot, and as you know, the process is the punishment in a lot of cases for a lot of people who just go, do you know what? I just don't think I want this battle. I think I want to. These things just use up so much money, emotional time. You know, they're very difficult, and it's only some brave souls who push them. But this is it. All these organisations have been told for years they're acting in breach of the law. They don't appear to care about that. The people, when a tribunal is won, nothing seems to change. The people who have been breached the law don't get sacked. If there is a payout, they're not the people paying it out. It's the public sector or a private company, but not them. People cheering yesterday, going, "Oh, it's all changed now." I'm thinking, is it? Because if they were happy to breach the law the day before yesterday, they're happy to breach the law today, aren't they?
Well, maybe, but I think it will focus a few minds. And the EHRC has been really clear. Baroness Faulkner was really clear that they are going to take an active interest in making sure that everyone obeys the law as it now
That's
stands.
the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And,
Yes.
and the leader of that, I mean, she has been very outspoken on this issue and has had extraordinary abuse and threats as a result of that. And as she points out, you know, they're perfectly happy to act for trans rights, but in this case, it's women's rights that are being trampled on.
That's right, yes. And, you know, we've fought very hard to get women's rights, and this has been a bad few, you know, years of a decade at least we've been having to deal with this.
Yeah.
And we seem to have lost a great deal. But I'm especially angry at those organisations that have been advising governments and telling them, lying to them about the law. And, you know, in Scotland, I am furious because our government pays these organisations and they pay them to lie about the law.
Let's talk about who we're
them.
talking about. The Stonewalls, Mermaids, BBC. But again, I'm not angry with
in
them.
Scotland, I want to give a special shout out because I'm cross about them. And we've won. I want to give a special shout out to the Equality Network and Scottish Trans Alliance, who have been hugely influential with the Scottish government and have been misadvising them on the law. But even worse, I think, are some of Scotland's supposed feminist organisations like Engender, which get over $500,000 a year from our government to lie about women's rights. And I think that is despicable.
You know what? I'm more angry at the government and the ministers and the civil servants for doing that and for listening to that, because I thought we elected them and we paid them as civil servants to actually obey the law and to change the law where it was necessary. In terms of it, some of the reaction online and in the media yesterday was sort of about, well, you know, this is a terrible day for trans people. I mean, I don't think it is. I think actually, if you're somebody who believes yourself to be living in the wrong body, you know, and you have gender dysphoria, or someone who you're a man in particular who likes wearing women's clothing for whatever reason, you want to carry on going about your life quietly, I don't think anyone's going to bother you, because there won't be this big battle anymore if this does change things. But first thing I'm always fascinated by is what rights is it that trans people claim they don't have, or that they have just been taken away from them? That's the bit. I'm not aware that trans people have any different or less rights than anyone else in this country.
No, you know what they wanted. It was the men within that cohort that they talk about. They talk about trans women who are biologically male, because again, there's so much sexism involved in this. It was a group of men who wanted their individual desires prioritised above the safety, dignity and privacy of women.
Yeah.
And that was what it was. It wasn't anything to do with rights. It was to do with special access, special privilege and demands. And in some cases, I'm afraid that there are some of that cohort who have a fetish. Now, I don't deny there are some who are very sad individuals who have had very tough times and probably do have gender dysphoria. But unfortunately, there are quite a few of them who have intentions that we wouldn't put up with if it was if it were men who said they were men.
No.
But there's also a group in there, a group of natal women who actually stood to lose rights. And you know, the trans organisations never speak out for the women particularly. It's always about
men.
They speak out for the people they say are women.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, it's never been a trans rights movement. It's always been a misogynistic anti-women movement. But I've heard some people who identify as trans men, in particular, saying that, you know, look, I won't be able to use I can't use a men's toilet because I look like I am a woman. They may think they do. I don't know whether they do or not. But I can't use a women's toilet because I'd be breaking the law. Therefore, I can't participate in society. This is about the erasure of trans people from the social world and from the public world. What would you say to that, Susan Smith?
Well, I think there's been a lot of women who haven't been able to participate in society because of these stupid policies. You know, there were women from ethnic and religious minorities who cannot be in a mixed-sex space. We heard from women in Glasgow, Muslim women, who said they wouldn't go shopping anymore because they didn't know that they could have a female changing room. And so why are their rights to go and change and shop and go to the loo not important? But vulnerable women who needed rape crisis centres or domestic violence shelters who said they were frightened to access it in case they came across a man.
Yeah.
So these people have been pushed out. Nobody seems to care about them.
Yeah.
But I would say as well, you know, to those people, they've been lied to. These organisations lied to them, and they said it was their right to go in there. But on the toilets, I would just say one thing, that, you know, we operate as society by a sort of system of civic consent. And we don't police toilets. I mean, there's all this nonsense. People are going to be asking for identification on the loo.
Look down your trousers,
checking your, we don't do that. But what women can now have the confidence is that if they go into the gym and there is a bloke standing there with his pants off, they can go back to reception and say, "There's a man in there, get him out."
Yeah.
Now,
without being banned from the club for transphobia.
No, there may be some people who you wouldn't know, and you know, maybe we're not going. It's not that people are going to have a sort of set an alarm off if they go into the wrong space. It's they genuinely pass. But I think especially with many of the male cohort, the trans-identified men, they're slightly optimistic at how well they are.
I think you're being generous at best. I mean, I think sport again has been a massive issue. And I was saying to my guest earlier that I really think that getting people into the sport, you could see, you know, the horror of watching a man punching a woman in the face in the boxing women's final at the Olympics really brought it home. You know, Leah Thomas in the States, a swimmer who was average as a male swimmer, miraculously winning as a pretending female swimmer. Cheats is what we used to call those people. Let's go back to that word. That really brought it to life for a lot of people. It was very plain and obvious when you got a 6-foot bloke on the podium and 2 5-foot women going, I can't beat this guy. But one of the issues that's it did bring it to the fore for a lot of people was when Nicola Sturgeon and her SNP government in Scotland were quite happy to put Isla Bryson, a double rapist who identified as if he were a woman. I mean, he didn't identify very well. He put a blonde wig on, and he still had his tackle completely exposed in his very tight leggings. I mean, he was making such a mockery of it. But you know, and he was going to go into a women's prison because, you know, trans women are women means he could go into a women's prison. That outrage really struck a lot of people. But I think most people are totally unaware there are still men in women's prisons right now, today in Scotland. I think there are 2 in England. That needs to end today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You know, there's a murderer. He's sexually tortured someone and murdered them, and he is in a women's prison. And he has assaulted a female guard. Well, they downgraded it from assault to reckless behaviour or something. But the upshot is the same. A woman, a female guard in this case, was hurt by this man. Now, the Scottish Prison Service had said, our new policy is that if they're a danger to women, they won't be placed in the women's estate. Well, he is obviously a danger to women. He's harmed a woman. So why is he still in there? Yeah. So, they need to be totally out. There are murderers and sex offenders in Scotland who are male in the women's prison, and the excuse given is that, well, they've not actually hurt a woman. Oh, and I would say to that, what, yet? Yeah. And yet, how do you know they haven't hurt a woman? Because most people who have hurt a woman don't get convicted. And are you really saying that somebody who's brutally murdered a man is going to be held back by some kind of innate chivalry for hurting
exactly
women?
I mean, the absurdity of it. Well, I mean, that's what absolutely needs to change. That's number one for me, because those women behind bars with those men are seriously at risk. Susan Smith, our time is up. I'm going to leave you to continue your celebrations. I think you and all of the women who joined this battle, from, you know, J.K. Rowling down to, you know, someone just making the tea at the meetings, absolute heroes. You've done such a service for this country, and not just for the women. You've done it for the men as well. And I think you've actually done it for trans people who believe they're trans, who want to just live a quiet life. I think you've done everyone a favour. We thank you. Susan Smith, Director for Women Scotland. 10:48 is the time. Up next, going to talk to The Spectator's James Heal about, the latest wranglings to get us back into the EU by the back door. This is Talk.
great victory for common sense. And after so many horrible news stories coming out of the UK for so long, and so many different areas, whether it's our economy, whether it's the fraying social fabric, or the hatred of our culture by the elites, or you name it, you got it. This is a remarkable good news story. And yet, of course, it therefore highlights just how far we've fallen. Yeah. We have this Supreme Court, which people will remember was a kind of weird, pointless Tony Blair vanity project.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. Before we go to our next guest, just want to give a really brief reaction to what Susan Smith, the fabulous Susan Smith, had to say.
Oh, she was absolutely superb. And this all comes down to extremism, and we shouldn't allow minority extremism to dictate to the majority. And whenever people say, but this is free speech, it's not free speech when you're imposing a minority view, and everyone else then starts to follow that and try and
you're censoring people and punishing them for stating facts. But
exactly.
There we are. Exactly. Well, let's talk to James Heal right now. He's Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. Very good morning to you, James.
Morning, Julia.
Always good to speak to you. Let's talk about some other facts. Net zero. There is a net zero kind of rule within the EU, which basically is about an emissions scheme where they all kind of share out the cost of the emissions. Keir Starmer, for some bizarre reason, is trying to sign us up to that. What would it actually mean for us?
Sure. So this is about the emissions trading scheme, which we've had since we left the European Union. There's a common one across the whole of the EU, which is to encourage them all to invest in net zero products together. But since we left the EU in 2020, British carbon credits have been very much cheaper than those in Europe because the government's cap on the overall quantity of emissions has been much higher. And this is to help sort of carbon-intensive industries, such as steel, of course, we've heard so much about, fertiliser be produced at much lower cost, which benefits those UK businesses. Obviously, those in Brussels aren't too keen on this, the fact that there's a competitive advantage to carbon-intensive businesses in the UK. And so it's suggested that at the next EU summit, which is about a month's sort of time away, one of the things that the UK will need if it wants to get a better trading relationship with the EU is going to be signing up to this net zero carbon emission scheme, which of course means higher costs imposed on carbon-intensive industries. You thought the steel industry might have suffered enough, but also it means for consumers, potentially, according to the Conservatives, further increases in gas bills of around £120.
A year, wow. I mean, again, I'm not sure people... I mean, the pips are already squeaking, are they not? I mean, the reality of this trading scheme, and it's like this sort of carbon offsetting, or get a plane and then have some trees planted. This is like medieval purchasing of indulgences, isn't it, basically? It's an accounting nicety. It's completely and utterly meaningless.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, Julia, is, one of the few Labour pledges they did make before the election was bringing down energy bills by £300 per household.
And they've gone up by more than that, haven't they?
They have, yeah, by that exact margin, I think, almost identical to £300. And the problem is, if you keep imposing these obligations on business and they are then passed on to the consumer, and your energy prices are only going to go one way, which is up. Yeah. And so right now, Labour has the kind of stated preference of cutting bills coming up in conflict with their revealed preferences, which is constant net zero emission schemes like this. And of course, it also runs into their commitment to join, the EU by the back door, basically.
Well, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that in many different ways. The talk of, under 30s being able to travel and work freely between the EU and the UK. Again, opening freedom of movement up by the back door. But we've also got this very interesting scheme, which Keir Starmer's apparently going to try and sign up to with Emmanuel Macron with the French, which is a sort of one-in, one-out rule, where basically when a Channel migrant arrives, and we're up to wonderfully round, well, not round number, but nice looking number, 8,888 now is the official total figure of migrants who've arrived in this country since the beginning of the year. That's more than 40% up on the same period last year. But they will send back one of those Channel migrants to France, because we can't send them back to Afghanistan or Syria or wherever. We send them back to France, but in return for which we'll have to take someone who is a family member of someone who is already here in the UK who wouldn't otherwise be able to legally gain access. I don't know about you, I can't work out how we gain from that.
Well, I suppose the argument the UK are putting across, and this has obviously appeared to in the UK press today, it's appearing to the sort of UK domestic audience, is that somehow you get rid of some young man in their 30s, etc., who maybe, you know, unknown criminal history, etc., and you therefore perhaps
living in a hostel. Yeah,
absolutely, and bring over a wife or a child or something like that. So I can understand maybe how the UK could try and spin that, but the French are never going to accept that. Why on earth would the French have this kind of deal? And I suspect we'll end up sort of taking people in, but are we actually going to be able to send any back? I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the French have been very reliable on this for many years. Let's talk about something that really does matter to people back here. Getting your bins collected, not something that happens in the Birmingham area at the moment. That ongoing bin strike, it's been going on since the beginning of March. I mean, genuinely, we only get our black bins, you know, the smelly rubbish collected every 2 weeks, and that's bad enough. Thankfully, it's not been too warm lately, but we've got rats, cockroaches, foxes, goodness knows what, other vermin on the streets of Birmingham. Absolute horrific mess. There just doesn't look to be sort of any sign at all that this strike is going to come to an end, and fears that it could spread to other parts of the country. How damaging is this for Keir Starmer in particular?
I think the longer this goes on, the more damaging it's going to be, in the sense that it thereafter becomes a matter of sort of government management of the unions, obviously raise the old fears about the back to the 70s, etc. I mean, you know, to be fair to Starmer, I think that, you know, obviously the initial costs were imposed under the Conservatives, where their equal pay legislation has basically forced the Birmingham Council to make cuts in this area. So I don't think this is necessarily just about Starmer. But as you say, Julia, the longer this goes on, it risks damaging his credibility. And I think it also just shows that this is going to be something we see more of in the future. You know, I remember 3 years ago, we had a similar story in Glasgow City Council, where the authority, cash-strapped, basically cut back on bin collection, and that led to rats of a similar size. And right now we've got sort of rodents, as Nigel Farage put it earlier this week, the size of which haven't been since the Western Front, running around Birmingham. And I think that given the pressures on local authorities, this is going to be something that comes up. And also, as you say, these kind of bin distributors are going to go elsewhere, because I'm sure that local authorities in other parts of the country are going to have these equal pay pay and claim, and it's going to really put lots of pressure on authorities at the time. They're really cash-strapped.
Well, you talk about Keir Starmer's credibility. In terms of that Supreme Court ruling yesterday, I wonder how credible he is, given this is a man who told off, you know, one of his own MPs at the time for saying that only women have a cervix. He's insisted that 99.9% of women only don't have a penis. We've got Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, talking about those campaigning for single-sex rape refuges for women as trans-exclusionist hate groups. Do they have any credibility on this now that the Supreme Court has clarified the law as what we all knew it was 10 years ago and what most of us knew it was for the last 10 years?
No, and there's if you read the Times today, Julia, there's a briefing from a senior Labour Party source who says that, oh yes, Keir's been on a journey on this, and it shows how much of a wonderful grown-up he is. He was a student activist in 2019. I mean, number one, of course, it doesn't say much for, you know, standing and getting elected as Labour leader 4 or 5 years ago on a false prospectus. But second of all, it also just shows how weak Labour has been on this. I don't think it's just Labour, in fairness, but you know, you had Bridget Phillipson, I think, late as 2023, still insisting that some women could have penises.
Yeah, no, Keir Starmer in 2023 said that. I mean, if he's been on a journey, it's been on one of those very fast trains rather than on the usual ones, you know, making their way, rolling along the countryside. I think this is going to be fascinating. The next PMQs, when Kemi Badenoch, who has been very solid on this issue, even when in government, actually takes him to task. James Hill, great to talk to you. Come back on again soon, Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. So much more to talk about. Don't forget, on that Supreme Court issue, we're going to be talking to Shivani Dave. She was on the show a little while back. Do you remember telling me off for using her correct pronouns, even though she's non-binary and thinks they are they, them? We're going to talk to her about that in the next hour or so. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
It's so funny. We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a House of Mirrors, where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Yeah, moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour
across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And my goodness, didn't we see some common sense yesterday from the Supreme Court? Trans women are not women. You knew that. I knew that. Pretty much everyone knew that. But they're not, because they're men. It's as simple as that. There are men, there are women. It's binary. You can't change it. Yeah, 88-page report, 5 judges. It took 5 years for that case to actually get to the Supreme Court. But does that change anything? That's what I want to know from you today, because women's rights groups have celebrated that triumph. They're now calling on the government to ensure that activist managers and civil servants abide by the ruling. They need to act the pro-trans guidance that's everywhere, in schools, in the NHS, in prisons, in elite sport, in kids' sport. I want to know from you, crucially today, do you think that this changes anything? Will this actually bring an end to trans ideology everywhere in our society? It's a private sector as well. Tell us why you think it will. Tell us why you think it won't. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also, we're going to be talking, as we just touched on with James Hill, about British officials in talks with the French about a deal that would see one Channel migrant being deported in return for receiving one person from France under a pilot scheme where we would accept migrants seeking to reunite with their families. But I'm not quite sure what's in it for the French, or indeed what's in it for us. Or maybe we save a bit of money on the hotels and hostels. I don't know. But we'll talk about that with Ben Habib, who'll be on the show. And also, an ocean world teeming with alien life may exist. And it's only 124 light years away from Earth. That is many, many, many tens of thousands of human years in travel. But it's a new study by Cambridge University. So what do we make of that? We'll be talking to our space expert, Andy Lound, about that. You know I love us happy space boffin. And so much more to talk about. Do welcome your calls, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. Love it if you get in touch. Lots to talk about. Love to hear your thoughts. Also, the thoughts of the brilliant, the wonderful Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, who is joining us for the whole show. Morning to you once again.
Good morning again.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look, we talked an awful lot about the Supreme Court. There's lots more to talk about, but this is a massive, massive story. It is interesting to me, actually, how much a lot of the mainstream media that is fully signed up to this madness, the BBC and others, are trying to sort of move on from this and very much looking at the Supreme Court ruling as a sort of a blow for trans people and looking at them as the victims, whereas in fact the whole point of this is it's righting a wrong by establishing what the law already was, establishing what it should have been treated as for the last 10 years or so, and actually righting a wrong against women and girls, whether it's I mean, whoever thought mixed toilets in primary school or secondary school was a good idea? Have these people ever been children? To placate one child who mistakenly has been told that they are living in the wrong body or a non-binary. I mean, whoever thought, mixed wards in hospitals was a good idea? What absolute psychopath thought it was okay to put a man who has committed violence, even a rape against women, inside a women's prison because he puts a wig on and some fake boobs, takes one hormone shot and claims he's a woman? Whatever made anyone think that a 6-foot bloke who was average at male sport should be allowed to compete against women where he would easily beat them? In every single example, again and again and again, it was always insane, but it's been happening. We've watched it in slow motion. Question, Philip, though, does it change now?
It almost certainly won't change now. That's the trouble. If our politicians wanted to wrestle the initiative back again, and our mainstream media wanted to wrestle the initiative back again, what they should do is turn around and say, we lost our way, we got it wrong, it's now been clarified, we've got that, let us fix the mess that we were part of over the last 15 years.
I don't trust them, though. I certainly don't trust. I've got a whole list. I mean, this is just some of them. A whole list of the quotes from members of the sodding cabinet, most senior, most powerful people in the country, and their statements, not like from 2012, from as recently as 2023, as recently as last year, saying things where basically, Angela Rayner, that people who, the idea that a woman who is seeking a refuge, escaping her partner who has raped her, seeking refuge there, could ask for there not to be any men there, and that the people who are pushing for that to be maintained, to protect those women and allow them to feel safe after being brutally assaulted by a partner or a non-partner, as trans exclusionist hate groups. And that was a woman. That was a deputy prime minister of this country. The prime minister of this country thinks that 1% of us, 0.1% of us have penises, and it was wrong for one of his own MPs to say that only women have cervixes. I mean, do you trust any of these people, anyone who pushed this ideology, to right the wrong, or do we need a full clear out of these people?
We need a full clear out. They lack any moral courage whatsoever, and that is going to be measured by the excuse book. They've already gone through volume 1 and all chapters. They're probably about volume 16 of excuses as to why they made these statements beforehand and how they've been on a journey, and this has been clarified. No,
I'm trying to think of a word I can say on air that I won't get Ofcom for.
Yeah,
one of them definitely begins with B, and there's a K there. If you know what I mean. I just absolute beep.
Yes. I could say it, but I won't. The way you looked at me there.
Makes me so angry. But I mean, the battering. I mean, look, any sinner who repenteth, we welcome.
Well, exactly. But
except what has been done to women activists on this issue. I mean, and men who have done, the Graham Linehans of this world as well. The vicious abuse, the threats, rape threats from male trans activists against women. I mean, it's almost like there was a reason why we didn't want you in our changing rooms or our prisons. But the people have lost their jobs, people have lost their livelihoods, they've been absolutely ousted from civilized society. Look, I don't care. I don't feel any need to be liked by people who are stupid and who are bigoted. I don't care. I had abuse early on. I just turned it back on them, literally just like, come and play. I don't care. And they hate that, so they didn't bother with me anymore. But they've gone for people they thought they could bother. This has been such a vicious, nasty battle, and it's been enabled by the Keir Starmers, the Angela Rayners, the Yvette Coopers and others. That's... as I said earlier, I'm vindictive. I want people punished.
It's unforgivable. You know, our politicians from the very highest level, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Cabinet members down, have been the catalyst that the...
And the last lot said the right stuff but did nothing about it.
Well, exactly, but the catalyst that's allowed the trans extremists to have a view that has imposed a minority extremism view on the majority of the people in this country, and it's cost us millions, and it's going to cost us millions to get out of it. But I don't mind us having to pay to get out of it if things change. I fear they won't.
And it's going to have to be money, isn't it? They're going to have to be tribunal after tribunal. I mean, but again, we've got the cases, nurses being forced to change in front of a male supposedly claiming he's trans. He's not. Never, no gender recognition. So we've got a man who claims to be a trans woman, a doctor, and they've gone to tribunal. We've got a nurse who is outrageously racially abused. The N-word used to her by a violent, aggressive paedophile claiming to be trans, who was handcuffed to prison officers. He's behind bars, and when she was talking to the doctor, she referred to him as Mr. and he said it's outrageous. She is the one who's been disciplined, even though she was talking about inserting a catheter into his penis. I mean, again, if he was a woman, he wouldn't have one, would he? Oh, unless Keir Starmer would like to butt in now and have a word. I mean, the absurdity of this, Maya Forstater lost her job. That's why she's running Sex Matters now. People like Sharon Davies, Olympian swimmer who lost out being a gold medalist because she was dealing with steroid-pumped women athletes from Eastern Europe, saying she would never let that happen again. Steroid-pumped men, i.e. just men with higher steroid levels than women in women's sport. She's lost all of her work. She lost even the charity work that she did. She did for free. And the abuse that these women have had for the years, the attempt to cancel J.K. Rowling, one of our greatest, authors, and a woman who's, a force for good, I would say, in the world. It's been horrific, and I'd like to say, it's only been on one side. People talk about the heat in this debate. The Cash Review mentioned that. It's been on one side, on one side only. It really has. There might be some horrible bigots who are saying horrible things to trans people. No one I know involved in any of these campaigns has ever said anything hateful or transphobic, ever.
But these trans extremists, there's what, 50, 60, 100? I don't know. A tiny, 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 tiny number who have caused so much impact across the board. And people like Sharon Davis, she's never going to be compensated for what she's lost and what she's suffered. But those that have lost their jobs, that have lost their livelihoods, that have everything else, need to be compensated. And I do hope that there's a very big law firm sitting somewhere over in the city there who's getting their class actions together, and we'll take this collectively.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I think heads going to have to roll. They really, really do. Love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Do you think things will change? Donald Trump and his executive order on women and women's sports and things, welcomed all of that, and again the fact that the next Olympics are going to be in the US is really helpful there. I think there's going to be a big backlash. And basically, as far as I'm concerned, we were all quite happy to be quite friendly and nice. I didn't mind people having a change in their passport and using people's preferred pronouns. We were being kind and nice. It's gone too far. Sorry, you pushed it too far, and now you're losing out. Soz. It wasn't us that did that. It's the activists' fault. Blame Stonewall. Don't blame the women protecting their own rights. Let's talk about this one-in, one-out asylum scheme. We have had a record 705 illegal migrants across the channel in 24 hours. 8,888, nice easy number to remember. Official figures, it will already be more than that now. We've had a lovely sunny day. I'm guessing the seas are calm on the channel. We've probably had another 500 this morning. But that's the number who've officially crossed the channel since the 1st of January. It's up more than 40% on last year. The latest plan is this one in, one out rule. We send over a load of our illegal migrants back to France, and we get an equal number of people here who are trying to come to our country to claim asylum, to get to our country, to be with family members, sort of a family reunification scheme. Will that not, just simply mean no difference to us other than we're not paying for the illegal migrants' hostels, but that's a public saving there, but will that not encourage more people to try and get across to establish that family link and get more people over?
Well, a couple of things. 8,888, that's an infantry brigade of fighting aged men coming in.
Very good point.
We can't sustain this. The threats are enormous. But how do you identify who someone who has got no identity documents, no passport, nothing else, is actually related to someone that has got a legal right to stay in this country without them then going out, having to go through a registration process? So that's going to be set up. So this is, another clickbait headline out of the government trying to suggest that they're doing something and trying to divert us from, the gangs haven't been smashed. Where's the smashing the gangs?
They have not been smashed. I know, we're all surprised.
And are we going to, whenever we send people back, are we going to negotiate with the gangs to get one in? Because the French government clearly doesn't understand, otherwise they'd have dealt with it already.
Indeed. Let's talk about your particular area of expertise, and that is the military. Talks are going on in France today. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has arrived in France to talk about the possible peace in Ukraine. He's been with Putin again, another long meeting. I don't know if he was kept waiting 8 hours this time. The idea, if you're the envoy of the United States president, you would wait 8 hours to see another foreign leader. I mean, seriously, 20 minutes in, I'll be back on my plane home. Bye-bye. This guy is the golfing buddy of the president. Yes. He's a very rich man. I'm sure he's great at doing a property deal. No evidence that he may be a deal maker when it comes to international affairs. When he's talked about Ukraine before in an interview online, he didn't even know the names of the 4 provinces, regions of eastern Ukraine which had been taken by the Russians. He seems to think Crimea, we got names wrong, and he thought Crimea was one of them, but not. A bit worrying there, but also he has repeatedly spouted some of the Putin talking points, the Kremlin talking points that the bots put out on social media. We've still got the US president continually talk. I mean, he's blamed Zelensky as the third responsible person for this invasion, and not even for the war continuing, but for actually Russia invading. A bizarre accusation, again, a Kremlin talking point on social media accusation, and continue talking about how millions of people have died in this war when it's in the low hundreds of thousands, still too many. Most of those are Russian troops, which he has sent into the meat, his friend Putin has sent into the meat grinder. Do you think there's any chance that we are going to see any reasonable outcome for the Ukrainian people, the only people who matter in this, in my view?
Not unless the Ukrainian people deliver it themselves, with hopefully European support. And Witkoff is being played by Putin, and that's Trump's special envoy. Very embarrassingly. And Trump is listening to him, unfortunately. Marco Rubio is with him in Paris, but I fear what the EU is going to do, if they try to push the EU to do this, is the EU is going to try and set up separate institutions and command and control structures to what already exists in NATO. NATO's used to taking and building the coalition of the willing. It's done it in Bosnia, it's done it in Kosovo, it did it in Afghanistan, it's done it in different places. But the EU might see this as an opportunity to try and bring together the EU in a slightly different way and bring EU defence policy together. That's what really scares me about what's going on here. And this is where Britain's part in it is critical, because we can bring that level of common sense, and if we can get the Americans to reinforce that, we can actually get something on standby should there be some form of peace deal or ceasefire. And I don't think there will be.
Yeah, the coalition of the willing hasn't been quite so willing, it would appear. But at the end of the day, Zelensky agreed to a 30-day ceasefire across the board, land, sea, air. Vladimir Putin has put such absurd conditions on that, no agreement whatsoever. Turn me into a unicorn, you may as well add to it. It was just so nonsensical. But crucially, Zelensky's even said, look, if I'm the problem, there's no doubt there's personal animosity from Donald Trump towards Zelensky. And I think Donald Trump's treatment of him has been utterly appalling, genuinely embarrassingly appalling. But Zelensky said, if I'm the problem, I'll go. I will go in return for the security guarantee that his country needs. But there is no point at all to Zelensky signing up to any so-called peace deal, which leaves Russians where they are now in Crimea and in the Donbass region without any guarantee, absolute cast iron, such as that exists these days, from either Europeans, Americans, or all of the above, that not a single inch more will be taken by the Russians without all-out war. If Putin knew that NATO would literally 1 inch that's it, it's all out war. He would not go any further. He understands shows of strength, does he not?
The only thing that's going to stop Putin is Putin losing in Ukraine. And I've heard this week from numerous commentators who understand this even better than I do. And if Putin gets given anything, he will see that as a green light to go elsewhere. If Putin
got 20% of Ukraine,
well, exactly.
doing
But
well,
if he's allowed to keep that, he'll take something that'll allow him to rebuild his military capability and everything else, because he's hurting a bit. But then the message that will send to other despots around the world who've got territorial ambitions is, oh, well, all we have to do is ride the wrath of the international community for a couple of years, and then we can keep what we've got. And Xi Jinping will take Taiwan. And the economic shock that will cause across the globe will make Putin's move into Ukraine 3 years ago seem like loose change down the back of the sofa.
Is this all linked in then with this trade tariff war? Because there's talk, by the way, of a UK possible trade deal within the next 3 weeks. We'll see. We'll see if
only
that
if we
comes
keep
off.
away from EU policies.
But again, we can't have both. We can't have both. But there's a lot of talk about Donald Trump trying to strong arm the EU and Britain, particularly because a bigger bloc, splitting from China. Now, we had a guest on yesterday who's like pushing the line that, well, this has all been, clever 4D chess game of basically hurting China. Of course, this huge trade between China and America, but also the rest of the world. And basically, China is funding everything, its military and pushing its economy on exports. It's a huge export economy. But is this then what's going on in Ukraine and elsewhere? Is this all about other global concerns that America has?
It's all linked, and America's priority is China and dealing with them. We see that in the comments that he's made about rare earth metals in Greenland and Ukraine. We've seen that in the way he's dealt with Panama and the Panama Canal. We've seen that in statements that have come out of the White House where he said, my priority is China, and we've seen that in the trade tariffs and the trade tariff war. And China is the second largest economy in the globe and had aspirations and was on a path to overtake America as the largest economy. So this is where Trump is trying to attack China, but he's attacking himself at the same time. And we're in a game with instability around the world that is unfortunately very similar to what was going on between America and Japan in 1940 and 1941. And the Americans started to put huge trade tariffs and restrictions on imports into Japan. That caused the Japanese to go for Pearl Harbor.
Well, this is my thing. I've been saying this for weeks and weeks after the tariffs were announced, that my concern is that the tariffs are they are a form of diplomacy, are they not? And as you've always said, war is not something separate from diplomacy. No. War is part of diplomacy. I am very worried that an economic trade war becomes a real war.
It could lead to a shooting war, and unfortunately what Donald Trump's doing at the moment is he's not breaking up paths to global conflict, he's creating more paths to global conflict.
Right. Fascinated to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch. Lots of calls coming in, of course, on that landmark ruling by the Supreme Court on women. Well, only one kind of us. There are no subsets, trans women or men. We're going to get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000 on that. Really interestingly, all of the calls that I can see on the board are from men on that. That surprised me. I have no preference whether it's a man or woman calling, but that surprises me. Maybe all the women are just nursing their hangovers after celebrating last night. I don't know. But do give us a call, whoever you are, however you identify. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
I think what they also need to consider, and this is definitely a legal matter and something that will be much debated, what now happens to those toilets and changing rooms that have been designated as unisex?
Well, we just had that text from that lady.
Well, it did. So I would now suggest if the Supreme Court, the highest court of this land, have said that women are women and men are men, and women can't have penises, and women have XX chromosomes, and men have XY chromosomes, and so on, that now there needs to be a reshuffling, should we say, of this woke nonsense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up in just a few moments' time, we are going to be talking about that one-in, one-out migrant return policy with France being discussed with Macron, and at his time we'll be talking to Ben Habib about that. Also going to talk to space expert Andy Lound about alien life being found a small 124 light years away. Probably couldn't make it there in any of our lifetimes, or indeed many thousands of lifetimes. But what does that tell us? And I wonder what he makes of that Blue Origin space flight with the women astronauts in inverted commas as well. Get his thoughts on all of that. First up though, let's get to your calls, particularly on the Supreme Court ruling yesterday. Crucially, I want to know, I mean, obviously, if you're sane, and if you are a listener or you're a watcher to this show, I'm guessing you are. We all knew that trans women were not women. We knew that already. Well, that was what the law already was. That's what the Supreme Court has established. However, what will actually change? Do you think there will be an end to this trans ideology that's imbued every part of our public lives now? I want to know what your thoughts are. Well, let's go to John, who is in West Lothian in Scotland. John, what do you make of it?
Well, good morning, Julia. A fantastic result, and all this nonsense was started by our pretend parliament up here.
Not a fan.
Oh, sorry. Our previous First Minister started it. The First Minister allowed the man to go into a woman's prison.
Not a man, no. I mean, a lot of men.
All right, a lot of men. And they've also been instructing the health service, and there was one nurse in Fife who objected to one of these people changing in a female changing room, and she was threatened with her job.
Yep.
And we've now got instructions to the education system in Scotland saying that there will be unisex toilets in all the schools.
Yep.
It's just absolutely crazy. And to think that they could get away with it when the vast majority of population, which is the vast majority of population, are against it.
Yeah, well, that's because they think we're all transphobic bigots. Yeah. And they really do. This is the argument, not from just Scottish politicians, Westminster politicians, on this side of the argument, and too many. That was largely on the left, but too many on the right playing along with it, or just not speaking out. Or if they did speak out in it, they didn't do anything about it. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Rishi Sunak. And Boris Johnson. All the people who said, "Oh, this is all nonsense." Well, do something about it then.
Well, we had one of our local councillors up here put forward a motion to protect spaces for women and girls, and it was voted down by the SNP, Labour, and so on.
Exactly.
And so luckily she has written to the First Minister, and she had written to it before this ruling came out. So it'll be absolutely fascinating to see what he now says, because I had an interview where he said that he was accepting the ruling.
Well, he did, yeah. We read it on the show yesterday. But here's the thing, John Swinney accepting it, and the Prime Minister here in Westminster accepting it. It's all very well. But the law hasn't changed. This was always the law, and anyone who paid any attention to any of the employment tribunals would have known this was the law. Anyone who understood what a woman was, I mean, sex and gender, I mean, the ruling from the judges of the Supreme Court was sort of, I mean, it was almost like chastising people. Of course everyone knew what a woman was, what it meant biologically. It wasn't just someone who identified on a Wednesday afternoon. But what actually changes? Do you think that it will actually change now? Because these people were in breach of the law for the last 10 plus years.
Well, I think he'll now have to, because there are elections in Scotland next year. And, you know, the population is totally against the policy that they were taking. And what they were imposing on people, they were putting people in danger.
Yeah.
And I think people will now stand up and see this ruling as a way of saying, sorry, get your act together, or on your bike.
Yeah, I mean, I really do hope so. I really, really do. John, thank you so much for your call. James is on the line in Staffordshire. Hi, James.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. What do you want to say?
I've got 3 points, if I may. The first question is, are they now going to empty all the women's prisons of the men?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I know there are 2 in England. I think there are more in the women's estate in Scotland, so probably some in Wales as well. They should be out today. Well, they should never have been in, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. The second point I'd like to raise, I'd like to slightly take it to task. I'm sure Keir Starmer said the gangs are smashing.
Well, indeed, they're certainly not. Yeah, the gangs haven't been smashed, that's for sure. I love it.
And then the third point I'd like to make, if I may.
Yeah.
The political will is sadly very lacking in this country to take on a magnitude of the problems that we've got. The High Court ruling shows that we may just be on a slight turnaround on that.
Fingers crossed.
By far the simplest way to cure the whole Channel crossing thing is anybody who comes across on a boat is taken straight away to the Ascension Islands, which is a British sovereign territory. There can be no recourse there. Any ambulance chasing lawyer has to pay for his own flight. And we just leave them there for a couple of months and then give them the opportunity to go home. That's what Trump's done, and it's worked.
I have to say, I'm liking that idea. There's only a big grin on Philip Ingram's face then. I've not been to the Ascension Islands. You've travelled everywhere. Have you been?
I haven't. My sister-in-law has, and it's lovely. I think we should use South Georgia because that's slightly better. You know, the temperatures there will make people make their minds up more quickly. Yes.
Focus the mind. James Staffordshire, thank you very much for your call. It's coming up to 11:32. Up next, going to be talking about that one in, one out plan in terms of dealing with channel migrants. We're also going to be talking about that EU net zero deal, which Keir Starmer's hoping to sign with the EU so we can put up our energy prices. That seems like a good idea. We'll be talking to Ben Habib about all of that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:34 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer and this is Talk. Philip Ingram still with me as well. Delighted to be joined now by former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. There's an awful lot I want to talk to you about, but let's start with this one-in, one-out asylum scheme, which apparently is what Keir Starmer's trying to do as a deal with Emmanuel Macron, which means that we'll have an illegal migrant who turns up on a dinghy from France. It's always a young man, he turns up, and then we get to return him to France, in return for which someone who has a link with a family member in the UK, but who would otherwise not be able to come here, who's in France, we get that person instead. Have I got that right? And why would that be a good deal for us or anyone?
You've got that spot on, I think, and it's something we've seen before, Julia. We saw it's a complexion of the Dublin Accord, of which we were a member when we were part of the EU. It's also not hugely dissimilar from the quota share system that the EU had put forward for the allocation of illegal migrants. But fundamentally, what it boils down to is a legalization of illegal migration, because when you take the one who arrived here illegally and you replace him by one that's been sent to us by France legally, that we've effectively legalized illegal migration. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And so nothing could do more than to encourage people from their general movement from Syria, North Africa and elsewhere into Europe than this scheme, because they may take a bit of a lottery on which country they eventually end up in, but they know that once they get to Europe, they're basically safe because they'll just get handed around until they're settled.
Yeah.
It's an absurd proposition. And the only way to control borders is, as you and I have discussed famously, at least on one occasion, if not others, is enforcement of our borders at the point that people seek to breach them. Yeah. That is good old-fashioned border control.
Can I ask if there's reports today that right now there is a migrant rescue operation taking place in the Channel, no doubt a dinghy that is sinking or has sunk. We don't have any further details on that yet. If you were in charge, what would you be doing?
So if you shut down the movement of people, if you made it abundantly clear that you will not be allowed into British territorial water, you wouldn't have to rescue anyone because people wouldn't attempt the journey in the first place.
And that's what happened with Australia. That was very clear. Right now, at this moment, what would you be doing?
Well, ideally, I would try and rescue them in French waters and then take them straight back to France.
And if they'd got into British waters?
Well, then sadly, sadly, I say, don't pick me up on it. Don't have a go at me. The minute they're on British, Philip can put me right if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the law is the minute they're on a British boat, they're protected by British law, which means the human rights law, ECHR, everything else.
Philip Ingram is nodding, a former senior military intelligence officer, those who've just tuned in. OK, but you would rescue them. I just want to clarify that. You wouldn't leave them to drown.
You have to rescue them, absolutely.
Just want to make that clear after previous conversations. But here's the thing.
No, but can I just say, on our previous conversation, I did also say they should be rescued.
Yes.
It was when you pushed the point.
OK, all right. I just want to clarify that for everyone, for your benefit and ours. OK, but this is the thing. I mean, this comes after, just today's madness. A Nigerian fraudster with autistic children has avoided deportation. Olufemi Adenyi Ojele is in prison after being convicted of a sophisticated fraud during the pandemic. He's found guilty of having immorally defrauded a loan scheme, which gave small businesses up to £50,000. It's always the upper appeal tribunal, isn't it? Judges there, led by Elizabeth Ruddick, say that deporting him would be unduly harsh on 2 of his 4 British children because they had autism and significant additional needs. Therefore, very compelling reasons not to grant the Home Office's wish to deport him back to his native Nigeria. Utter madness. I'm thinking he shouldn't have gone to prison at all either, because that would be unduly harsh on his children, who apparently are autistic, or are they? Who knows? You get extra benefits if you have children with a special need. Come on. This is a nonsense. There's a story like this virtually every single day. What are we going to do about it? Because a lot of people talk about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights and all that. But if we've got this is in our courts. If we've got judges on tribunals who make these sorts of rulings, and they are day in, day out, these rulings. We have to get rid of the judges, don't we?
Well, there's something very fundamental that's taken place, I think, in our judicial system, and it's this notion that everyone has an equal right. So when it comes to criminality, actually, the criminals are being afforded the protection of human rights, often at the cost of the victim. And in the case of this fraudster, he's having his interests, so-called human rights interests, protected, even though he has created victims through his criminality. And it's the same principle, frankly, Julia, that applies to people who enter the country illegally, where we elevate their rights to the point where we're prepared to set aside the interests and the rights of those who are effectively damaged by those people coming to this country. We all suffer damage when people come to this country illegally because we've got to pay for them, etc.
Well, and the young women who are dealing with the sexual harassment, which is now off the scale from young men from often very alien cultures who really do not understand how women expect to be treated in this country.
So in this sort of blind application of the Human Rights Act and the European Convention of Human Rights, we've effectively somehow set aside the rights of victims, the rights of civil society, the rights of British citizens, the nation state. We've set all of that aside, and we've elevated to the most senior and most important position the rights of criminals. And we've got to get a grip of it. And it's the same, by the way, with the grooming gangs, with the gang rape gangs. You know, we're almost putting a protective blanket. We put a protective blanket around those who were perpetrating the crime and around those who turned a blind eye to the crime and ignored those innocent young girls who were tortured and raped.
Absolutely.
The victims' rights were set aside, and we protected the criminals.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's utterly bewildering, I think, to most right-thinking people. Can I ask you also about another EU teaming up plan that Keir Starmer has? I mean, there is no end to the ways in which Keir Starmer is trying to get us back into the EU by that back door, whether it's the, allowing people under the age of 30 to work freely in the EU or in the UK, freedom of movement by the back door. That's one of the key things people were voting against. But also signing us up to the European Union Net Zero scheme, and this is basically it's an absurd scheme. It's a carbon credit scheme, and apparently this is part of our plan to strengthen our ties with Europe. But look, you were an MEP when in the Brexit Party days. Tell us just briefly what this carbon scheme actually does and why we would want to sign up to it when it would mean that our own energy prices would have to go up.
It's an absurd concept. So the notion is that if you produce a certain amount of carbon, you can somehow offset it by paying a tax, as if that carbon that you produce disappears simply because you paid a penalty to a government. That's the underlying principle. And I suppose there's a form of deterrence in knowing that you've got to pay money across. We have our own ridiculous laws in this country which require companies, when they emit more than a certain amount of carbon, to pay penalties. What this effectively does is bring that hurdle right down so that we can deliver even greater damage to our industry.
I mean, no one thought it was possible, but well done.
Well done. And, we've literally just experienced the results of this kind of madness with what's happening in Scunthorpe. And at the heart of Scunthorpe, we can debate its ownership, the fact that it was in Chinese hands.
This is the steelworks, yeah.
The steelworks, yeah, British Steel. But at the heart of the problems at Scunthorpe were just ridiculously high energy prices, because we've shut down our own ability to extract coke, which is what's needed for the steel making process. And here's another example of what they're doing.
But Ben, everyone knows it's better to get coal from the other side of the world. Did you not read that memo, for goodness sake, man?
So, in a box-ticking exercise to meet net zero, we have deindustrialised the United Kingdom, made ourselves vulnerable, and damaged consumer interest.
Well, and again, which is why, of course, Keir Starmer thinks we need to sign up to the EU. Are you worried, as someone who was a Brexit Party MEP and played a crucial role in a lot of that campaigning, and I very much thank you for that, that we are going to be taken back into the EU to all intents and purposes by the back door, but we're going to be a rule taker, not a rule maker, absolutely to the core.
Absolutely right. That is precisely what he's doing. And you may recall that in September 2023, when he thought the cameras were off him in Montreal, he said that if I were ever to become Prime Minister, I'll so closely align the UK with the EU that no one will be able to tell the difference.
That's what Keir Starmer said, yep.
Yeah, and so we are signing up to their sanitary and phytosanitary regulatory regime and making the European Court of Justice the supreme body for adjudicating those things in our own country. We are giving more fish away to the EU. We're going to be signing up to the European Defence Union, which I'm sure Philip will be up in arms about, proverbial up in arms. We are going to sign up to this ridiculous exchange of illegal migrants. We're signing up to this carbon trading thing. Keir Starmer is fundamentally a Europhile before he's British. And he will hand over decision-making powers, adjudicating powers from this country to Brussels. And in my view, when someone does that, they are effectively anti-British because they are handing over control of our country.
More crucially, not a Democrat, because we had a vote on this in 2016. It was very clear.
Absolutely.
And we also had another vote in 2019. Candidates, MP candidates for the Brexit Party stood down to allow Boris Johnson to get that mandate to get Brexit done. There is a clear double mandate by the British people for that to happen, and he's trying to undermine that. And he campaigned against it for many years. I've always said the man, he's not a Democrat. You either accept. I don't question his right to be Prime Minister. I accept the outcome of the vote and the democratic free vote in our country last year. But he's still questioning. Well, we didn't really know what we were doing. I think it's just outrageous. I have to ask you just finally though. Can I ask you, I know that this is still very very much in the skeleton stage, but you've been very critical of Nigel Farage having left the Reform Party. When you moved from Brexit to Reform Party, you were deputy leader. Many people felt that you were very unfairly ousted in that role. You've been a very good communicator on that. You've very much backed Rupert Lowe in his battles with Nigel Farage, and we know the British political road is littered with many people who've taken on Nigel Farage over the years. Now it's merged on social media. You are starting a new party, the Integrity Party, promoting various things, social cohesion, strong institutions, economic systems, open communication, cultural identity and the like. Do you really think that we need another political party on the so-called right?
I'm afraid we do, because the so-called right is rapidly moving to the left. And if you're watching Nigel Farage closely, or not that closely even, you will see that he's made a dramatic shift away from his earlier position. So, for example, he is now on the record saying he's not worried about the rate of demographic change in this country. He wouldn't deport all illegal migrants. It's too difficult a job. He's put forward people like Charlie Mullins as candidate. Charlie Mullins being a rabid Remainer. Well, then he's accusing Charlie Mullins of having told porkies on both talkTV as Talk Radio.
I don't think Charlie Mullins shows any place.
And Sarah Potchin, their candidate in Runcorn, for example, who was welcoming Syrian and Afghan refugees.
Okay, cannot talk about a by-election. There are other candidates. Stop now. I'm going to have to read out a list of all the candidates now, Ben. I'm going to have to leave it there. Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP, thank you very much indeed. Very, very quick response from Philip Ingram. Don't mention a by-election, please.
No, he's right in everything he says about the EU, and the EU trying to get more superpowers, including across defence, and it is wrong. And if the government tries to align itself more with the EU, it's going to take away any favours that we're getting from the United States.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Coming up, I'm going to read out a list of all the candidates at the Runcorn by-election. Thanks for that, Ben Habib. These Ofcom rules, we have to obey them. Up next, also, we're going to be talking to space expert, and I imagine very happy boffin today, Andy Lound, about alien life found, but only 124 light years away. But what kind of life form is it? That's up next. This is Talk.
We had the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. We had the Bataclan massacre in Paris in 2015. We have had tasters of this. It's just that whenever we've had tasters of it at a far lesser scale, but when we've had tasters of it, we in our society try to pretend it away. What were we told after the Manchester Arena bombing? But don't look back in anger. Why? Why not look back in anger when your daughters are murdered?
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to the very, very exciting news of alien life being found on another planet. Only trouble is, it appears to be 124 light years away from Earth, which is an awfully long way in human lifetimes. Indeed, many thousands of human lifetimes. So will we ever encounter that life form, and would it be worth encountering? Well, let's talk about this with space expert Andy Lound, who joins us. Very, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Now, you know I love a happy boffin. Are you a happy boffin today with this report from Cambridge University, an astrophysics there, led by Professor Niku Madhusudan from Cambridge's Institute of Astronomy, basically says it looks like some of the gases in the atmosphere on this planet, many, many, many light years away, could only be there if it was as a result of some sort of organic life form. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm still having to temper it because nobody's saying absolute definite. Yeah. But 18 months ago, the Webb telescope looked at the atmosphere of this particular planet, K218b, and found that within the atmosphere was one of two types of molecules, dimethyl sulfide and dimethyl disulfide. Now, what's significant about this material is that on Earth, it's only produced by organisms, phytoplankton in the oceans and bacteria. There is no other way of producing that on this planet, and that's quite significant. If you look at the planet that they're looking at, it's 2.5 times the size of the Earth. It looks like it has a large ocean. It may have a hydrogen atmosphere. It's orbiting a very small cold star, a red dwarf star. But its position means that the heat it's receiving is enough for carbon chemistry to take place. That's the important part of it. And therefore, within that environment, to get these chemicals, you would expect it to be a biological process. They're only at what's called 3 sigma. You want to be at 5 sigma, and that's the level of confidence you have in the results you've got. And they want even more data to come back now. But 18 months ago, there was a lot of people suggesting now there's something wrong here. So they've spent 18 months getting more data and saying, oh, wait a minute, our confidence is now rising that this result is great. Set of experiments are taking place now in laboratories, I would assume around the world. Yeah. To see if you could produce these chemicals in a non-biological way.
So you can rule out that last percentage. But the key thing about this, we're not talking about, little green men, are we? We're not talking about some sort of, and we're not talking about, the plot of Interstellar and we found another life planet. We're talking, as soon as I heard this is a planet which is, I think it's 2.5 times the size of Earth, but it's all ocean. So I was thinking immediately of Interstellar and these huge waves rocking, smashing into the into the spacecraft. But we're talking about, if they do exist, the tiniest microorganisms. But that, of course, is how life would have started on our planet. So that's what's so significant.
Yes, it's a very significant thing because it does indicate that biological life, carbon chemistry, can form on another body. And that is really, really
We're
important.
not alone. If it happened here and it's happened there or happening there, then odds are it's happened in many other places. But isn't that what most scientists in this field think anyway, that actually with billions and billions upon billions of planets, the odds of it not happening elsewhere would be pretty minimal.
But we're scientists, not politicians, and we're not religious people. Belief isn't enough. We need evidence, hard evidence. That's critical.
Wow, can you tell the climate scientists that?
Say again?
Can you tell the climate scientists that? That would be nice. I thought they just used computer models.
I mean, I've written a book about hydrogen, so I do understand some of it, and some of the data is very good. I think the mistake on a lot of the climate stuff is the way it's been put out to the public.
Well, yes. Let's not get waylaid by that. Here's the trouble with this planet. It's 124 light years away, which is 700 trillion miles away. Even with the fastest space rocket we have right now, hi Elon Musk, how long would it take humankind to get there?
Tens of thousands of years. So it isn't going to happen. Right. And if you could travel at the speed of light, it'd still take you 124 years to get there. So we're not going to visit the planet someday soon, but the new telescopes are going to be launched in a few years' time with with optical equipment designed to look physically at these kind of worlds, and then we'll get a better view of it then, and that would be quite fantastic. But it is a very significant thing. This is, the possibility that there is life out there somewhere else. I mean, it's a very, very, very profound issue here, and it has a knock-on effect a lot on probably social thinking and the way people will perceive their existence in the universe if this is a
well, I've always thought, we're clever monkeys on a rock hurtling through space. This is it. That's all there is.
Absolutely.
Of course, this is happening elsewhere. Why wouldn't it? The trouble is, space is so huge, time is so vast, that by the time we would get to the point where we could actually discover these civilizations, they themselves may have disappeared in the same way that ours will. I don't think that's a pessimistic view. I think that's just a realistic view. But is there any possibility we could ever encounter, other than sort of some farmers in a cornfield in Idaho, is there any chance we will ever be able to encounter alien life forms who can reach us and who are of an intelligence they can reach us?
I think there is a possibility of that. I really do. It's one of those things where I think there was always a possibility. But if we take exposing, you've got extraterrestrials who could travel the vastnesses of space and could reach us. Their technology and their social structure will be far more in advance of us. And if they look down here on the Earth and they want to visit our species and they looked at the way things are going down here, do you really think they? No, and it's a serious thing.
These people don't even know what a woman is. Let's not bother with them.
Exactly. I mean, would they really want to? I mean, let's be honest. Bearing in mind, when Europeans went to Central America, they brought with them diseases, and many social structure in Central America collapsed because suddenly there were these other people with these guns and all sorts of things.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, it could be dangerous for us to be visited.
Oh, I absolutely think it would be dangerous. Either that will just be experimented on because we'll be so far behind. Just finally, really briefly, if you could, what did you make of the all-female Blue Origin rocket crew, the likes of Katy Perry on? They were talked about as astronauts. I mean, they weren't astronauts. I don't think I would have ever got on because I haven't had Botox or hair extensions. But did that not make a bit of a mockery of space travel?
I don't. It depends what. No, I think in this particular type of flight, no, because of the type of nature it is. It's just
tourist stuff.
These quick jump ups and down again. What it did good for, which was quite important here, we've got people like Katy Perry, who is a musician and
very
artist.
Briefly,
And I think those kind of people could actually spread the word of space and the beauty of space better than many others.
Well, you and I, if we ever became multimillionaires, we would absolutely do it if we could, wouldn't we? Andy Lamb, thank you very much indeed. Space expert, and I think we can say all-round happy boffin there. Would you go into space if you could, Philip?
Yes.
100% yes. Right, up next, I'm going to talk to you about this. We're also going to be reading out a list of the Runcorn candidates. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Ghost.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. 2 minutes past midday is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you are watching on YouTube or on your connected device, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, very, very welcome to join us on the show. Delighted to say Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, is also still with us in the studio. And when I say we are the home of common sense, I would say, you know, common sense has broken out the Supreme Court as well. Only about 26 hours ago now, yesterday, we had that victory for common sense at the Supreme Court when they ruled that, well, something most of us already knew. Trans women are not women because they are men. That was the ruling. Women's rights groups celebrated the triumph and have now called on the government to ensure that activists, managers and civil servants and everyone else, schools, hospitals, police, everywhere across the board, now abide by that ruling by axing pro-trans guidance that breaches women's rights and safety in schools, hospitals, elite sport, you name it. We'll be talking more about that in just a couple of moments. Plus, going to talk about the royals. Yes, the sort of royals. Prince Harry and Meghan. Harry apparently lost interest in the Centre Barley charity after which he founded, of course, in memory of his mother, after marrying Meghan Markle and moving to the US. That's what the charity's co-founder said. Of course, she, has that co-founder is somebody who has been part of this whole move with the chief executive, who's they tried to oust. Also, it's been reported that White House officials believe that a trade deal with Britain can be finalised, and within 3 weeks. Will it happen? Are we at the front of the queue? Well, we'll find out. I would love to hear from you. Plenty more time to take your calls after that landmark ruling by the Supreme Court. Question I'm asking you today, a lot of you saying, yeah, you agree, common sense ruling, trans women are not women. However, do you believe this will actually change things? Because this is establishing what the law already was. Is it going to actually change things now? So give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one, standard network rate message. Well, to discuss all of that right here in the studio, I am delighted to welcome back Shivani Dave. She's a journalist and broadcaster. You do a Friday night show on our sister broadcasting station at Virgin. And it's lovely to have you back in the studio. Last time you were here, you were a bit cross with me, and it went rather viral because I referred to you as she and her because you are a woman. You identify as, I believe, non-binary. You prefer the pronouns they, them. And
whichever one's the scariest.
You took me to task for using what I believe were your correct pronouns. Does that landmark ruling by the Supreme Court change anything for you?
Well, so first of all, thanks for having me, Julia.
Always welcome.
Lovely to speak to you. Friends call me Shiv, so Shivani, Shiv, whatever pronouns scare you the most are fine for me. And I kind of want to say, I wrote you something, because obviously this is a huge topic. So a few sentences, if you let me say what I want to say. In years to come, I believe this decision by the Supreme Court will be considered shameful. Women are, in my opinion, beyond description or categorisation. Women are funny, knowledgeable, powerful, strong, and in my experience with trans women, they're kind. Trans people are not your enemy, and women are marginalised within our society already, here in the UK. Defining women by their sort of biological functions or their appearance has never helped any woman ever. Isn't that what the suffragettes were sort of fighting against in the first place? The ruling and this discussion entirety kind of is resulting in a distraction from the sort of disturbing reality that we're living through, which is, the facts are, the UK has an emboldened far-right population, our government is fuelling a genocide, violence against women and girls has shot through the roof, and spoiler alert, it's not because of trans women. The LGBT community is most likely to experience abuse, addiction, homelessness than the straight community, and within that, those who suffer the most are women, they are trans women. These are women who make me personally feel safe. They're the ones that I want to dance with at 2 a.m. in the morning and watch football with on a Sunday afternoon. The law can define a woman however it wants. You can call whoever you want, whatever pronouns you want, but what are you really going to do? Are you going to make people cis or trans carry ID with them so that they have to prove who they are? Because to me, that sounds like 1930s Germany. If I were to call this out for the BS that it is, and if I were to swear on air, I would be in more trouble personally than any bigoted politician or presenter that has ever played a part to further marginalise this already vulnerable community.
Right.
Despite the years and even decades that some broadcasters have dedicated to vile and hateful dog whistles about communities that bring so much joy and happiness and creativity to the world and this country, I just think that the people who are celebrating this with their bottles of champagne are going to look back, or hopefully we are going to look back at them and think that it's actually quite dark and quite disturbing that what they are celebrating is a separation of vulnerable people from society who are not going to be able to access the services that they need to access.
Right. Okay, there's a lot to unpick there. Are you including me, just out of interest, in the vile and hateful dog whistle broadcasters?
It's a self-ID situation. If you feel you sit into that...
No, well, I don't, obviously, because I've not been hateful about anyone who's trans
if
or...
Right,
do you? I'm asking you.
It's not for me to put you in a category.
It's not for you. Oh, OK. Right, here we go. Right, you say it's shameful. You think this in the future will be regarded as shameful. I mean, you obviously think it's shameful now. And trans activists, many of them argue it is. Right?
I'm not a trans activist. I'm just a person.
But I'm talking about many trans activists. I wasn't including that. When you say women are beyond description and categorisation, well, no, I mean, that's like saying, well, a table or a dog is beyond description and characterisation. We have words, and words are only useful as an ability to communicate between human beings because we all agree what those words mean. So if I hold up this navy blue mug and say that's orange, and use one of those, we have to be using words that have the same meaning. It's navy blue. So when I say it's navy blue, you have to understand that as the same thing as I understand that. Otherwise, it's a meaningless conversation. So when we have a conversation about what is a woman, we need to all know what we mean by that. Now, it's your view and the view of many activists, I'm not saying you are, and many activists, that women has a number of different categories. People who were born women and are women, and men who believe that they are women or have a piece of paper saying they are women. The Supreme Court was very, very clear.
Yeah.
They're saying not only is the law now, they're saying it has always been the case that because you have a piece of paper, even a piece of paper, a gender recognition certificate, saying that you are legally a woman if you're born a man, you are not in fact a woman. Do you not accept that, or do you accept that ruling?
I mean, like, that's whatever. Like,
no,
for
that's
me,
not an answer to a question.
Let me finish
You're not a 12-year-old.
Let me finish my sentence. That is, to me, whatever, because for me and my community, trans women are women. They have always existed. They will always continue to exist.
What does that mean, they've existed?
Well,
no one's saying they're figments of imagination.
Yeah, but we are saying that they're women.
No, you're saying they exist is not the same as saying they're women.
Well, I'm saying that they're women.
And but that's not the same as saying they exist.
If the law doesn't want to...
Well, no, so we need to use words that have meaning.
Well, here's the words that have the meaning, because I've spent time to write these words, right, for you.
And we listen to them.
Frankly, I would rather share a bathroom with 100 trans women than one legal biological woman who wants to know what's inside my pants. And Julia, if I'm right in remembering, you did ask me what my genitals look like once live on TV.
I think that was in the context of a conversation and you raised that issue yourself.
I remember the quote. You don't have dangly bits, do you? So do you want to discuss dangly bits or not? Because frankly, I am now feeling in a position where I'm in a room with you and I feel unsafe. Yeah.
You feel unsafe?
I feel unsafe. I feel my heart racing. My hands are starting to sweat. Do you want to touch my hand? Just clammy now. Okay. And I actually think I'm about to have a panic attack from sitting in a room with you. So I'd like to leave now.
What?
Yeah.
So you're feeling... Yeah, you were asked to come on the show to have a conversation.
And I've had a conversation.
We had a very nice...
We've had a conversation.
Well, you read out a statement, and now I'd like to ask you some questions.
You read out your statement. You did at the beginning.
Out a statement. No, that's me introducing the topic for people who are just tuning in and explaining
you added your
ad
libs. You got to say what you thought about it. I've said my piece, and now I'd really like to go.
I thought you were actually plugged into a mic there. I thought we were going to have a conversation.
I'd like to go.
You'd like to go? Okay, I wouldn't want anyone to feel unsafe being asked questions, but I have a funny feeling that was what Shivani Dave was planning to do all along, because I thought we were having a perfectly reasonable conversation, and she was certainly... Philip, you were here when she came into the studio. We certainly had a very friendly greeting, and she said she was always happy to come on the show.
Definitely, and
was allowed to read out her full statement, and I'm quite happy for her to have done that.
And her personal views and personal beliefs are fine. I respect those completely. And who she is quite happy to associate with, and her views on where she feels safe, changing and everything else. No problems with whatsoever. But personal views cannot dictate what goes on from a national perspective. And where there are bigger issues here, because it's important that you define what a woman is, what a man is, because that has practical implications of the NHS. Yeah. Who do you send for testicular cancer screening? Who do you send for cervical cancer screening?
And we've seen reports showing that actually some trans people are missing out on vital screening that could save their lives because their medical records are wrongly identifying them as female or male. Yeah. But this is the crucial thing. The whole point of this ruling was to make it very clear. I mean, questions I would have liked to answer, and if she's still in the building, if you want to come back in at any point, please do, Shivani. Are simple questions about, what rights do trans people not have that they want and they say that they need to have, because you can still use the toilets. Yeah. I genuinely don't think a trans person, a trans-identifying man who has all the appearance of a woman, who would not be questioned in the toilet, that's when I don't think anyone really had that big an issue with that. And certainly the women I know, they wouldn't have known, but certainly if they did, they wouldn't have had an issue with it until trans activists started, routinely using women's toilets and girls' toilets, forcing mixed sex toilets on primary schools and secondary schools and in the public sector. Basically, 6 foot men with beards putting on a wig and saying, I've got a right to go to a women's toilet or to go to a women's prison. It was trans activists who made this a battle, not women saying, sorry, we would like to have our own spaces maintained as our own spaces. I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask Shivani Dave about, Jenny, if she's still here, please do come back on air. I think we actually have this image, and I'd very much appreciate if we could put this image on air right now. This is a tweet that Shivani put out back in 2023, and there are a number of tweets of this ilk, but this is her standing bare-chested. She has had a mastectomy. She's very open about that. I'm not divulging anything personal. She has numerous pictures of herself on showing her mastectomy scars. Getting involved in political trans discourse to make this very intellectual point. Joanna Cherry, Rosie Duffield and Neil Hanvey, these are people who've massively campaigned for women's rights on this. And then the word F you. And a big smile. She's standing in front, and we've had to block it out. She's standing in front of a big banner which says, F the effing effers. I think that I can say that. Can I say that? Those words are spelled out in full, and she certainly spells out that word in full. I would say, very angry, very aggressive message about what people would regarded on the trans activist side as TERFs, people like me, trans exclusionary radical feminists, but really just women campaigners largely saying we don't think that men who claim that they are women should be in women's spaces. And I don't see any of that anger, certainly on my side of the debate. Look, there are horrible transphobes on social media and everywhere, OK? There are those people. Those aren't the people who are the women who, for Women Scotland or J.K. Rowling or Sharon Davies or Helen Joyce, any of the people, Maya Forstadt, people we talk to all the time on this show, campaigning about women's rights. Never been an anti-trans movement. I would say the biggest anti-trans movement has been the trans activists pushing this and enabling men who want to exploit rights given and kindnesses given to trans-identified people and exploiting those to gain access to women and girls' safe spaces. I mean, but that aggression, I find that... I mean, Shivani says she feels unsafe in the studio with me, having agreed to come in the studio and read her piece. And then the message she's standing in front of in that image is basically, I mean, I'm assuming she thinks that I'm one of those awful people that should, I'm one of the effers who should F off. I mean, should I feel unsafe at that point?
Well, also, isn't it interesting that we don't see women transitioning to become men?
No, believing they are, or living
at the forefront of these extremist views. And therefore, where's the balance in what's going on? There's no balance in it whatsoever. There's minority extremism is taking over elements of the trans community that is undermining those that feel as if they want to live a different way.
I think it's been terrible for trans people. I thought one of the interesting things she said in her... I mean, I was smiling throughout a lot of her statement because I really thought some of it was quite ridiculous. I reserve the right to have my, just I can have my reaction. Defining women by biology doesn't help women. I mean, That's literally what being a woman is. We are defined by our biology. Men are defined by their biology. And as we've seen in sport of all kind, whether it's darts or weightlifting or boxing, swimming, cycling, doesn't matter what it is, there is a clear biological difference between men and women. No man can become pregnant. No woman has a penis, whether Keir Starmer likes it or not. Only a woman can have a cervix. Things like there are some basic truths, and they are all defined by our biology.
Well, woman as a term now, and confirmed by the Supreme Court, it's been confirmed by biology beforehand, is a biological term, as is man. So you can't undefine something, and you can't have things going around the world that are undefined. No. As you quite articulately said, language is all about giving a common definition so that people can understand what you're talking about. You can't have things where you don't have a common definition.
Well, let's have the common definition of what it means to feel unsafe, because I'm of the view that there are a lot of people who use phrases like that. I think it's quite extraordinary for a woman who identifies as non-binary to come into the studio very happily, well, happening to be in the studio, sent plenty of messages, came in, as you say, off-air, all very friendly and nice, to then basically accuse me of making her feel unsafe, which is what she effectively did. But apparently it's completely unreasonable for women and girls in a toilet or a changing room, or perhaps held behind bars in a prison, or perhaps who've been raped in a women's refuge, to say that they feel unsafe when a man is in those places. She thinks that's unreasonable. She thinks that's hateful and transphobic. And I find that extraordinary, that is not a reasonable feeling for those women and girls. But she can walk out of a studio when someone is asking her questions about the statement she has just made on air, having agreed to come on air and answer questions. I find that quite extraordinary.
I think it's orchestrated clickbait.
Oh, what an outrageous thing to say. You don't think that was a genuine reaction?
That's me assessing things from an intelligence perspective, looking at the body language of individuals before, during and after.
Well, yeah, I have to say, Shivani Dave, you are welcome to come back in the studio at any time. But it would be nice if you felt willing to answer a question or two, or to stay for the length of the interview that we have booked. I'd love to hear your reaction to that interview. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000, and also want to know whether you think that that landmark ruling by the Supreme Court will actually change things in this country. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
People were relieved that Burkow had gone.
Agreed.
Do you remember how awful and impartial Burkow was over the whole Brexit debate? And we got a man who, at least in the House of Commons, generally speaking, does his job well. And now he's ruining that reputation. And this is a man who's a socialist. He comes from a socialist tradition. There's nothing wrong with that. But you would have thought that's the last person on earth who would waste taxpayers' money on jaunts to Malaysia. As you say, just stop oil.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I was with the view we're going to have a common sense conversation with my last guest, Giovanni Dave, about that landmark ruling of the Supreme Court, but she decided to leave the studio, claiming she felt unsafe when I asked her some questions about the statement that she read out for a number of minutes at the beginning of the interview. Love to hear your reaction to that. You've heard mine. You've heard Philip Ingram's, former senior military intelligence officer, still in the studio with me. Let's go to the phone calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Maria is in Surrey. Good morning to you, Maria. So good afternoon. Sorry, what do you want to say?
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Very nice to speak to you. The voice of reason and sensibility in this Orwellian world. I was going to ring in earlier, and I was doing some other things. Then I watched Giovanni Dave, and I just thought, no, this is beyond the pale now. She has done what every single trans activist has done as soon as they can't answer a question. They just get extremely defensive and walk away.
Well, and then claim being unsafe. She, I have to say, to clarify, she did say she's not a trans activist. I mean, she, I think, identifies as non-binary and prefers the pronouns they, them. And she and I had a discussion about that last time she was on some months ago. But leave it. I mean, I'm not quite sure what I did that would make her feel unsafe.
I think that's an utterly ridiculous statement to make you to say she felt unsafe. She felt unsafe because she couldn't answer the questions. She felt unsafe because she doesn't have a reasonable argument, and she can call herself I call her a trans activist because that is the type of person that's turned up at every event where women have tried, and the supportive men like Graham Linehan and James Dreyfus have tried to have conferences. It's always people like that who come and just, the activism is on their side. They always say this is a two-way street. No, it's not. No.
Oh, have you gone? We've lost you for a second. You were saying the activism is only on one side.
Yeah, because you look at the pictures back and the footage back. The activists they're the ones that are standing there saying decapitate TERFs.
And we've had some prominent people on this standing in front of things like that. Have you actually been campaigning on this issue? Have been out on the road on this?
No, I'm a 65-year-old. Aging myself up. I'm a 65-year-old lesbian. I was out on the first Pride marches way back in the late 80s, the small marches when we were in Jubilee Gardens. I went every year.
And that was about actually winning equal rights for gay and lesbian and bisexual people.
We did. I mean, I was in the start of Stonewall. I was a lesbian stand-up comic. I was one of the only people out there doing comedy for women, about women loving women. Yeah. And we got all Stonewall together, and all we wanted was equal rights. Yeah.
No one, not taking any rights from anyone else, just our own, same rights as everyone else. What rights this is the thing, I don't understand again, one of the questions I wanted to put to Shiv was, what rights is it that trans people think they don't have that everyone else has?
There aren't any rights they don't have. What we're talking about primarily, and with all the current cases that are going on, like up in NHS 5 and the Darlington nurses, and with recently Jennifer Melley, is about autogynephilic men. These are the men who have a philia. Sorry, my dog's barking.
Yeah, we had noticed. So there's an interview there's a chat with Maria and her dog.
Yes. These are the men who really get off on looking at themselves as women, but more importantly, you have to endorse that. That's their pleasure. Eddie Izzard got asked a question by Sandy Toksvig on a programme, and she said, what is it like when somebody calls you Susie? And he said, it's a really big hit. Yeah. Now, that to me defines a fetish. If you are getting off on the pleasure of somebody endorsing your fetish, that's your psychological condition.
But you can, and wear what you want, do it, that's fine. But don't require other people to play along, and that's the key thing. Maria, we're going to leave you and your dog now. Thank you so much for your call, very interesting. Greg is on the line, he's in Edinburgh. Hello, Greg, what do you want to say?
I'd like just to say that that was just some interview.
Well, it wasn't an interview. I mean, I barely got to a question.
But I think I take issue with the fact that you're asking her back. I'm a great free speech advocate and believe in the boundaries of free speech should be very, very, very wide. But there are some things that we just don't give the oxygen of publicity.
Oh, I disagree with you. I don't believe in such. If someone wants to say the Holocaust didn't happen or the moon landings didn't happen, whatever, I think you should always, when that debate comes up, have that debate, because you win debates by being right and having facts on your side rather than silencing people.
Yeah, but the trouble is she's not open to debate. And some people aren't, and these people are. And when they pose a danger to people,
well, she doesn't pose a danger. I mean,
well, she does. She does. The whole trans activist thing.
Again, she says she's not a trans activist. She's just a young woman who identifies as non-binary, living her own life. I think is what she would argue.
She's as much as a danger to young people and young women, particularly for people who say that there's no danger in starving yourself because you're fat. She is advocating a course of action that is a danger to young people and to young girls in particular.
I mean, I must say, certainly, young women cutting off their healthy breasts. I mean, I'd cry myself to sleep for the rest of my life. If my child did that, I have to say.
And you are giving the oxygen of publicity to people who are advocating that as a reasonable course.
I just wanted to have a conversation. Is what we do on this show.
Well,
Greg, no, I understand your point. I think a lot of people would sympathise with your point. But I always think it's much better to have conversations with people. And I thought a civilised conversation was what we were having, but apparently not. Greg, thank you very much indeed for your call. Lots more messages coming in about that. We were focusing on do you believe anything? This will bring an end to trans ideology. I mean, I'm judging from that attempt at an interview. I'm worried not. It doesn't look like people are going to accept it. Same Philippine Graham would say with the Cass review, which was. I mean, again, there was nothing new in the Cass review. It's incontrovertible what the Cass review actually said in terms of the treatment of children who believe they are trans and the use of all these puberty blockers and all of this. But we didn't really know anything new. But we thought it was going to change the game. But actually, the NHS can't prescribe these things, but private prescribers can. I think so many people are so caught up in this ideology. It is like a religion. They won't walk away from it easily.
Yeah. It is like religion, it's like a cult, and that's the difficulty. Once logic comes out to clarify something and extremists therefore lose the logical aspect of any argument because they try and cause that confusion, they then get even more angry. And this is where I have to almost agree with Greg, because you cannot debate sensibly with someone who has gone to that level of extremism, because their minds are just fixated. They will never listen to anything else apart from what's going through their heads.
But there's an argument about other people hearing it. When you watch somebody, if I were to, if one had on, people like India Willoughby and people like that, you kind of expose the madness of what they're saying. India Willoughby has been tweeting, he's a very famous sort of trans activist, and horrifically abusive to people on social media, to me and many others, and then blocks us. I mean, not that I really care, but I really wasn't reading his tweets anyway. But then you kind of expose the dishonesty and the irrationality by having that debate. And if someone wants to be unreasonable on that side of the debate, well, that's fine. But then let people hear that debate and realise that if you can't debate, if you can't have a sensible conversation and make your own arguments, maybe you haven't got an argument.
Yeah. Well, and this is where having the debate is so important. But there's very few opportunities in mainstream press to do that, and this is where we have to begin to recognise that actually we're not just informing, but we're also influencing. And if you soundbite stuff and things come out where you don't get this proper discussion, then you're influencing
I
too
like
much,
to think we've had some influence here. I've been here since 2016, 9 years on air talking about this issue.
Yes.
We were the only broadcaster talking about this, among many other issues like net zero, like Brexit, in terms of the way we're pushing it, and in terms of lockdown and things like that. Only broadcaster ahead of the curve on every single one of these major issues, and always proved right. Always. Now I'm going to be proved right, having interviewed Ben Habib a little bit earlier, who annoyingly mentioned the name of a particular candidate standing in the Runcorn by-election, which is we're in the purdah period under Ofcom rules in terms of you have to name every single candidate. So bear with me for about 30 seconds. I've got to read out the names of every single candidate standing in the Runcorn by-election. Here we go. Catherine Blakelock, English Democrat. Dan Clark, Liberal. Chris Copeman, Green Party. Paul Duffy, Liberal Democrats. Peter Ford, Workers' Party. Howling Lord Hope, Monster Raving Loony Party. Sean, you should have said that one to the last one. Sean Holston, Conservative. Jason Philip Hughes, Volt, UK. Alan McKee, Independent. Graham Harry Moore, English Constitution. Paul Andrew Murphy, SDP. Sarah Putchin, Reform UK. Karen Shaw, Labour. John Stevens, Rejoin EU. Michael Williams, Independent. There you go. Take a breath. We're going to have a break right now, and then we're going to be talking about the latest royal news with Angela Levin, royal biographer. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is still with me. He hasn't walked out the studio. Hopefully we can get through a whole interview with Angela Levin, royal biographer, without her leaving. Very good afternoon to you, Angela.
I'm here.
Thank you for promise to stay for the whole interview. It's so much easier that way.
Did I leave you before you were ready?
Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, let's talk about the latest royal news. And you know what it is. It's always about Harry and Meghan. I kind of feel like I need to wash myself down with Dettol every time we have a conversation about these two. You, of course, are a royal biographer of Prince Harry and many other royals, including the Queen Camilla. But it's interesting, this battle that's been going on about the charity, which the Centre Barley charity, which Prince Harry started back in 2006 in memory of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. So Princess of Wales. The Duke of Sussex, we are now told by the brother of Prince Seso, he's the charity's co-founder, lost interest in Lesotho and in the charity. Basically, after he got married to Meghan and moved to America and really had fading attention. And he said they killed the spirit of the charity after he left Britain in 2020. Do you think that's right?
Yes, I'm quite sure that's right. I mean, Harry and Prince Seso were really pals because they both lost their mothers in car crashes. And they wanted to build this, which would be in the spirit of their character. So it's a very emotional thing, not just to do a goodwill thing. And they were very close. And then Harry stopped coming the minute he was married. And that was it. But there's a nasty taste towards it, I'm afraid. You've had this before, that I'm quite sure that Meghan didn't want him to go there. She was very happy to go to Africa, but she refused to go to where the Centre Barley charity was. And I think
do we know that? Because my thing is the other thing. We always, I know you've known him well, but this is my thing. We could look. We've all seen this in people's family fallouts and things like, oh well, it was the wife that did it. But you know, he's his own man. He's a grown beep man. He can make his own decisions. If he wanted to go and look after the charity and go there, he could have done it.
No. But you have to say you've got to be strong enough. He's not. He adored her. I don't know if he still does, but he did adore her, and he wanted to please her. And she was very disappointed that he didn't have the money that she thought. She thought she would be hugely rich, and it's not. He only had a few £1 million, okay?
I mean, he inherited 20 million from his mum, didn't he?
Yes, but
I mean, how could you get by on a mere 20 million?
Exactly. But I mean, she was disappointed in it. I mean, once she'd got him, once she'd got his prince, she knew she would be very famous throughout the world. She knew she would be very rich because she would make sure that he encouraged her to do that. And I think you're being particularly kind because she is really a spiteful, nasty woman. And she wouldn't, at the Invictus Games, she's ruined that too, because she's taken over to do all the speeches. You know, she starts having a kissing game with him so that they get the cameras onto her.
Wait a minute, now hold on a minute. A kinder interpretation would be that it's bigger news if she turns up, and then the news media are more interested, they get more sponsorship, more help for the charity. And then, let's face it, the Invictus charity is brilliant, so is the Centre Bally charity. She's helping him.
No, what she demands when she comes, and she sometimes doesn't let you know till the last minute she turns up, she has to have a very expensive hotel, she has to have very expensive clothes, she has to be very paid for any travelling she had to do.
Oh, for a charity.
Such amount of money that there's nothing left. That's the trouble.
Is that what I mean, we know there was the battles with the chief executive of the Centre Bally charity, and then the attempts to oust her, and she's still in place, and that all became very much big news. This is Sophie Chandauka, and it looks like there had been some falling out between her and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. But I mean, she's talked about how she has Meghan, turns up at the last minute with her celebrity friends like Serena Williams, and that is a problem. But I don't remember her saying anything about the huge cost that it imposed on the charity.
No, I didn't say that. It's Invictus Games that.
Oh, well, Invictus Games. Apologies.
Yes,
okay.
Invictus Games that she's asked all the money.
Okay.
This one she didn't. She just came late and she drank champagne all the time.
Yeah, got the pictures in the paper because we're foolish and talk about it.
It's very sad, but Harry was marvellous at them. I was, with him once. He was with those little children who were very frail. That HIV and AIDS they could have had, or their parents had and died. He was completely brilliant with them. But Meghan made the diary, and that was it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, no love lost there, certainly between Angela and Meghan there. What do you make there? I mean, surely Meghan will be able to pay for everything herself now with her new As Ever brand.
Well, she can get rid of him now because she doesn't need him.
Well, he turned out not to be as useful as you think. Well, apparently she tried to heal the royal rift by sending King Charles an As Ever gift box of some of her items. I don't know whether it involved the jam or who knows what, maybe the bath bombs, I don't know. But this is what the US media are saying. We've also been told, haven't we, that Prince Harry, again by the US media, that Prince Harry has been cut out of all communication. So, for instance, his father won't return his calls, won't return his messages, doesn't keep him up to date on his cancer treatment, and he's out in the cold. But I'm wondering, he wouldn't be doing that because he knows it goes into the public domain as soon as he does.
Yes, of course it is. But actually, let's go back to what she's sending. It's the only place that they're sending to our country, UK. They're not going any further. So that's a bit of a mystery how it's going to go from that. It's a sample one. And the thing is that it's really a trick, in my view, and you won't like this either, but it is a trick, because if she gives it to King Charles, he won't want it, he doesn't want it. It's certainly not going to be compensation for all her rudeness and nastiness. She hates the UK, and but he has to answer because that's polite. That's it. It's very cunning. If he says, oh, thank you very much, I'm delighted with it, then thousands of people, she thinks, will buy it. So that will give her a wonderful format to get going. It's cunning. You can't think she wants to be nice. It's not nice. It's awful. And she, it's a PR success.
Oh, clearly it's a PR job. I just think fundamentally people who, unless there is a risk of abuse, unless there's been serious abuse of anyone involved, although, of course, you know, some question marks over what Harry reckons of his parenting by his father, to withhold the grandchildren from their grandfather and indeed their own cousins and uncle and aunt in William and Kate, I just think is really tragic. So many families have gone through family rifts and people do that.
So
it is cruel. It is absolutely cruel. It really, really is.
It is so cruel because they're missing so much, yet they've got their title, Prince and Princess. And if you go to a school like that, you know nothing about it. Kids can be quite unpleasant. Who are you? You know, where you are you? And I think it's very upsetting. And you learn a lot from other members of your family. All she's got is her mother.
Yeah.
And
that's it. It's interesting that she is so distant from so many of her family members, and he's now distant from Harry, from many of his friends. My rule is always never keep away from your child people who would also run into a burning building to save them. People who will love your child as much as you.
That's a very good idea.
Keep them close. Keep them involved in your child's life.
Yes, but it's really sad for the
whole
children.
thing is sad. The whole thing is very sad, tragic. Do you look? You know Harry well. You think he's kind of changed completely since he met Meghan. I was very hopeful. This is a boy who found love, and would go and have a happy life. If he'd gone off to have a private life, I would have cheered him onto the rafters. As it is, it's all just been very tacky. There's talk about a second memoir. I'm not quite sure how much has happened for a second memoir, but I no doubt it would be another bestseller. Do you think? And again, we're not inside any marriage. There are lots of people who think someone's got a good marriage, then they get divorced, or someone's got a bad marriage and actually they're deeply, deeply happy and their marriage is fulfilling for them. But do you think this survives? Because a lot of people who talk about, oh, he should leave her. You are talking about 2 children as well. And children, we know, need to have, as best as possible, to have 2 parents in the home.
It's very, very difficult for him because she will demand to have the children. And I think the legal things in where they live is very different from in the UK. I don't think that he could come back with the children, but if he can, she was going to make a huge fuss about it. It's going to be really terrible. And it would be very difficult for them. If he thinks about the children, they would be bewildered by coming across a whole new different way of life.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for staying for the whole interview. Royal biographer Angela Levin, thank you for that. Philip Ingram, particularly coming back to you on, do you want to talk about divorce? We'd rather talk about the Invictus charity. It's a fantastic military charity. Now, the initial story there was about, the Centre Barley charity and him losing interest in that. But Invictus Games are still ongoing. But what do you make about, the role that Prince Harry has it's still in somehow in international, national life?
Well, Harry does fantastic things for Invictus and for veterans. He'd do more quite happily. But, Harry, I think, gets too much bad press, A, because so many people don't like his wife. I don't know her, but even Donald Trump is commenting on her. So I have to listen to and believe what other people are saying. But also, I don't think he's recovered from the mental traumas that he's had from a child and from his military service. Yeah. I think he's still suffering from PTSD.
And you're very open about because you yourself had suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and you sought treatment, and it massively life-changing.
And I can see that in everything that he's doing, and that will cause him to withdraw. That'll cause him to be deferential to what his wife is trying to do. That'll cause him to try and force people to look after her and treat her like the princess that she clearly wanted to be and pay for things and all the rest of it. And he won't stand up to her. There are not many marriages where the man will stand up to his wife if his wife is a very strong character.
You can say that. I'm married to the stubbornest man in Britain.
Well, exactly. There's some very good marriages out. Some very good marriages out there where it works, but a lot of them it doesn't.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Happy wife, happy life and all that, eh? 12:46 is the time. Going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to former White House official Matthew Bryser about the possibility of a UK-US trade deal. We're told possibly within a few weeks. Is Trump trying to strong-arm the whole of Europe to basically split from China? And also, where are we with those talks with Ukraine? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Hospitals will have to get their acts together to think about how to ensure that spaces are safe for biological women, but also appropriate.
You don't have to call them that anymore. You can just call them women.
I'm trying to be politically correct.
No, not anymore. You don't have to be. The law's changed. You don't have to be politically correct. You're breaking the law if you're being politically correct.
But I can still be respectful for those who...
You can be, but I think it's disrespectful to women to call them biological women. Call them women.
So, OK, I'm happy to do that. So, for women to be respected on wards...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, mostly, like the Supreme Court. Bit of common sense on various things. 12:49 is the time. The last you're hearing there is from Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer who joins us in the studio. We've already talked about a lot of these topics already, Philip. It's great to get your thoughts on what my next guest has to say. Matthew Bryser is a former White House official in the Obama administration and joins us to talk about, well, all things related to the United States today. A very good afternoon to you, Matthew.
Hi, Julia. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Well, look, let's start where we are in terms of the possibility of a UK-US trade deal, possibly within the next 3 weeks. This is what White House sources are claiming. Are we really at the front of the queue of those, 75 countries who apparently have got in touch with the White House after those trade tariffs came in?
I was hearing earlier today, even 90 now are in line.
I mean, why not 4,000? Let's just...
I mean, of course, in principle, the UK would be near the head of the line, right? I mean, Americans love the UK, hands down. So does Donald Trump. The UK doesn't have a trade surplus with the United States of much significance. It's not in the EU, which Trump does seem to loathe, meaning the EU. And apparently the UK trade negotiators have offered some concessions that I would guess Trump would like. You know, dropping tariffs on, I guess it's beef and fish, and maybe lowering taxes on U.S. companies. So, okay, those are all appealing to Trump, but he's so unpredictable. And who knows if even on the UK side, those sorts of concessions would be sustainable.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you know, the free trade deals and things all very well, but as we've seen, British farmers already and still up in arms, as one can understand, about, free trade deals with Australia in terms of the impact on them. There's a reason why some tariffs exist even with countries that are otherwise free traders, because you're trying to protect certain industries, certain manufacturing or agriculture often for national security reasons, say, protecting British steel, for instance.
Yeah, good point. For national security or for politics, yes, of course. And, the U.S. agricultural lobby is super powerful, too. And that's, it's causing some problems for President Trump, even among Republicans. Last time we were together, I think I mentioned that one Senator, Charles Grassley from Iowa, was sponsoring legislation that will never pass, but legislation to try to take away some of Trump's tariff-making power because his farmers in his state, Grassley's, need to export a lot of soybeans to China, and they worry about retaliation.
Yeah, I mean, the countries that are at the front of the list, I would have thought would be the Indias, the Japans and others, where there's a much bigger trade deficit, but also where there is just a huge, bigger bulk of trade that goes on between the United States and those countries, in which case are we, rather further down and even well behind the EU now. As much as I love that we've Brexited, I love that we're an independent nation state, nevertheless, we are a smaller trading body than we were.
Yeah, well, I think Japan is way up there at the top of the list, too, and Trump has said so. And he said, I think it was yesterday, he announced how he's so pleased and honored to meet with the Japanese trade delegation. South Korea is apparently up high in line. But for Trump, I think the UK is emotional. It's an emotional issue. Yeah. And also, it's important to show a counterbalance on the other side of the Atlantic to the EU, which Trump is going after. I mean, the tariffs he laid on the UK are quote unquote only 10%, which is painful, but it's 20% for the EU. So he's been signaling all along UK is somewhat special.
But now everyone's on 10%, but we've got a 90-day, I think it's a 90-day delay on that. But I mean, my goodness, people don't know what they're doing. We cannot see, businesses can't make plans. Is part of this, now we're told there's this 4D chess game and it's all part of the clever tactics, and he was always going to back down on this and double the tariffs on China. What are they on, 145% now? It's difficult to keep up. Is it 125? Is it 145? Either way, it's too much. It's such high tariff. It's not worth any business almost happening at this current time. But is a lot of this about trying to not just get trade deals to the US very quickly and to, bring back, onshoring manufacturing in the US? And again, I'm not entirely sure you can do both of those at the same time. In fact, you can't. But crucially, is this also about, as many reporting today, that this is about basically decoupling the rest of the Western world, particularly Europe and of course, America, from China. We are so reliant on China for pretty much all of our cheap goods and pretty much all of our expensive goods as well, our gadgets, our tech, and indeed everything for our green energy revolution, all comes from China, and actually saying that we can't be so reliant on China. And is this a precursor to something more than a trade war?
Well, certainly, I think many economists, and you and I certainly on this in this discussion, agree that the world has grown way too dependent on China, largely for cheap goods, but not only. I mean, China is becoming, a technological powerhouse. Granted, usually adapting things invented elsewhere, but DeepSeek is pretty amazing. Yeah. I think the Trump administration is trying to rewrite and rewire the global trading system. And so there are, as you just said, there are a lot of objectives as part of this crazy mix of goals that contradict each other. Because in the history of the modern post-World War II integrated global economy, no one has ever tried this. So yeah, it seems haphazard because it is. There's too much that needs to be done. He's going too fast.
It certainly is haphazard. Are we going too fast on the possibility of peace in Ukraine? We've got the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in Paris today for talks with European leaders about peace talks in Ukraine. Steve Witkoff, the president's envoy, Gulf buddy, has been to see Putin yet again. I don't think he was made to wait 8 hours this time, so that's something. Apparently, Putin said, via the Kremlin spokesman, talks had gone well. But he's yet to actually, sit down with Zelensky in Kyiv and have a conversation with him. What hopes would there be that there could be some sort of deal?
I hate to go back to being the Cold Warrior that I am at heart, but I think there's zero chance. Putin does not want to stop fighting. He feels he's got the momentum. He feels Trump is on his side, in his corner. And the more Witkoff meets with Putin and not Zelensky, the stronger Putin feels and the less likely a deal.
Yeah, that is absolutely my fear as well. Matthew Bryson, great to talk to you. Former White House official, who also worked in the State Department as well as a senior official back in the Obama administration. Now, look, obviously, Philip Ingram, Matthew Bryson, work in the Obama administration. He is no fan of Donald Trump. But again, you and I, neither of us suffer from Trump derangements, should we? Praise him when he does things we like. We criticise him when he does things we don't like. But I mean, in terms of Ukraine, this is all part of when you talk about the trade, when you talk about deals, when you talk about China, and when you talk about Russia, these things all actually...
They're all linked.
They're all linked. Explain how they're linked.
Well, we've got this group of countries called CRINC. So it's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And they're all coming together. Now, Russia's reliant on North Korea for a lot of its ammunition and a lot of its military equipment that's coming in. China is exploiting natural resources from Russia and providing weapons to Iran. North Korea is getting its economy boosted by the deals that it's doing elsewhere. And they're all coming together. Now, that then brings together what's going on in Europe from a war perspective, what's going on in the Middle East, and the brewing discontent that's happening in Southeast Asia. That all comes together in global conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Again, my big worry is that we are heading in a very uncertain direction. And as we know from all major wars, there's not an obvious direct route. Look, people didn't even expect the Ukraine war when Vladimir Putin said, I don't believe that Ukraine is an independent nation state, and he put 120,000 troops and tanks on the border. People were experts, by the way, the experts were surprised by that.
And the biggest difficulty is Donald Trump that's making all of this up as he goes along. His team's not very strong around him.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much, Philip. Ian Collins joins us now. What are you going to be talking about? It's quite a lot about today.
We have a lot around today, actually, particularly the fact that they've solved the migrant crisis with those hotels.
Sorted.
Put them somewhere else. It's like brilliant.
Well, now we're going to do this. You mentioned this on the show yesterday. You were doing it. It came out, during my show. 1 in, 1 out migrant deal.
Yes.
How does this work? How does this help us?
The greatest concern that Labour MPs seem to have is, and I don't disagree with the massive waste of money issue, but that seems to be, well, we need to make better accommodation so that people are safer. Sorry to use that word. Safer, and they can be, looked after properly.
Do you know what I love? Was a caller we had earlier who said, I must pick you up. He said, Keir Starmer wasn't smashing the gangs. He thinks the gangs are smashing. Absolutely brilliant.
That's about right, isn't it?
Totally.
That is about right.
What else is going on?
It's
the first time we've actually had a bit of time to have a chat. We're normally witching on when he comes in. We don't get to it.
Well, there is, the EV car revolution.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one.
Still got the diesel.
Depending on who's writing the headline, it will tell you that sales are through the roof and everyone's buying into this.
Lol.
And then you realise they're being dumped at the roadside because companies are going bust.
Well, it's pretty much only car leasing, basically by companies which are improving their green rating, aren't they? No one normal is going out buying a green car now.
That's right, and you can't ascertain really the value of a green car because, like, when you go to a garage to buy a normal